2 minutes. 2 minutes to that.
Sure.
Oh, can we have the official community plan and zoning bylaw on the table for the meeting, please? The official adopted copy.
It's going to take a few minutes to go track one down.
It should be in Robbie's office.
Okay?
May I see if I can find it quickly?
Sure.
Okay.
Allison's office.
Allison's?
Allison's office. Hello.
Hello.
We're a little early or on time?
We got 1 minute and then we'll start
There's a copy of the OCP in Allison's office.
Yeah,
It's good with the zoning bylaw.
For reference.
Thank you, Robbie.
And Allison?
Is Jordan on the line?
I haven't seen him come online, no. He's not online yet. I did talk to him earlier, so he knows.
Yeah, so did I.
I just saw him as I was driving here, so.
Let him.
No, I think that's probably enough.
Okay, well, it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to start the meeting on time. So I'll call I'll call the meeting to order. Allison, are we live on?
Yeah, she said we were. Yeah.
Perfect, excellent, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna go right into, there's one thing that we do need to add to the agenda, which is the report submitted by Stephen Brown, which is the, what is it exactly here? It's the policing document, correct?
No, it's the enforcement update on the shoreline.
Sorry, thank you, I apologize. So that will be added, where do we want to add that? Just at the very end there?
You know, we put on the reports from administration.
Okay. Perfect, so we'll be sure to add that in as we go.
What was that
So
again? I didn't catch.
it's the shoreline bylaw that Robbie submitted.
It's the update on the shoreline uses that we were talking about there, Council.
Okay, yeah.
Well, we wanted to get it on tonight to have a discussion.
Okay.
Just like that this
Sure.
morning.
Yeah, he's 30 seconds away. We are going to continue though, just in essence of time. So we're going to go right into delegations with the RCMP for the enhanced police report. And we have, Dean, is it just yourself tonight?
Yeah, just myself.
Okay, excellent. So we'll leave you to the floor.
All right, thank you very much for having me. This is a pretty neat means of connecting with everybody, I guess. I've been sitting at the kitchen table and doing it, so. At any rate, I'll just give you a brief update now that it's March has passed and we're into April now. I'll just give a quick update and do the annual performance plan for the 2020-21 plan and kind of the end results that we were able to achieve and some of the successes, I suppose you could call them. So with respect to our advanced road safety, we had a total of 712 tickets and warnings issued to motorists around the area in the tri-communities. So that was a pretty good effort from you guys. We had a target goal of 700 and we ended up surpassing that at 712. Impaired drivers, we had a target goal of 80 charges being laid and there was actually 146 charges laid. So again, that might be seen as a negative thing, but at least I suppose they're being intercepted and dealt with. So that's the enhanced road safety. Our community, basically building and maintaining positive relationships. We had 437 positive contacts. Those are primarily meetings and the members visiting to all of the schools throughout the community. So that's pretty good. 407 visits was good to see. And then again, one of our other most, I guess, our crime reduction strategy deals with our prolific offenders and stuff like that. So there was 2,303 contacts with prolific offenders. That's through condition checks, knocking at doors in the evening and stuff like that. There was, we fell a little bit short. We had a goal of 2,500, and we only had 2,308. And again, for a little bit of the year, we were kind of told not to be going and knocking on doors just due to the COVID kind of rearing up its head in the community and stuff like that. But still, with that, with the political defender checks, I think there was some positive results. Property crime was down substantially last year. We've seen a 26% reduction in some of the property crime, so that was really positive. And then our search warrants, we had a goal of doing executing 17 search warrants, and there was actually 31 executed this past year. And I know you've probably seen a lot in the media lately. I think we executed 9 in the last couple of months, so that's been really good with some really good results of those warrants being done and people being held accountable. So it's really good. That's sort of attributed to our 3-member GIS unit we have. They've been doing some really good work in there. So I'm really happy to see that from my chair anyways. So before I move on to the enhanced policing report, does anybody have any questions about the APP?
Does anybody have any questions? No. I do have a question. Just in regards to, it says that you guys are going to be starting your foot patrol and everything happening now here. Is that sort of encompass sort of this discussion at the moment?
Well, we certainly can have that discussion. Like, I sent that message to you there before, Colin, in just respect to getting sort of the priorities in that. I laid out what the priorities for the RCMP are, but obviously that means nothing if it doesn't touch off on what the community's wants, wishes, and needs are.
Yeah, no, I just see at the bottom that your narrative is that that's what's going to be starting to happen. So, and I was also curious surrounding the bike patrol too, if that's something that's going to be starting shortly here too.
Bike patrol?
Yeah, was that ever a discussion or ever a consideration?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have any bikes, but it's something we can certainly discuss. With the RCMP, like, I guess if you're not familiar with the RCMP, anything that you want to ride or operate, there has to be a course offered, and you have to pass the course. So, it's something we can certainly look at. There's been bike patrol in different communities I've worked in, and I think it's effective in getting out into the parks and sort of interacting with people, and you can get to a location in a park really quick, actually. So it's something we can certainly look at. But like I said, we would have to then purchase a couple of bikes and stuff like that and get people trained. So it would be, urgent to get it going now if we wanted to have it accomplished so we could do it this summer.
And what is your plan with your regular foot patrol that you are saying that it's stated here in the narrative? Are you planning to do it a couple times a week, or what is the goal moving forward?
Sorry, I couldn't quite understand you there. If you could just repeat that.
Sorry, just like in the narrative, it does state that you're going to start conducting more regular foot patrols. So is that happening on a couple times a week basis when you're meeting with business owners, or what's sort of your plan moving forward?
Yeah, like there's an expectation of the members to go out, and now that it's getting warmer out, we can get out and you're not freezing when you're walking down the street. They can get out and visit with the communities or the businesses along the Ron John and stuff like that. And so my expectation is that the members, there's no reason that they shouldn't be doing it, throughout the week. It doesn't have to be just once or twice. It can be any time. So as long as it's getting done, that's the main thing. And so that kind of falls upon the shift supervisor to ensure that the members are getting up and doing that.
And sorry, my last question. So thinking to winter next season, does the RCMP invest in cold weather clothing and foot spikes so that, avoiding for ice? Because what I'm hearing is that's some of the considerations, that some of the foot patrol stuff wasn't happening because of icy conditions, cold weather. Does the RCMP invest in any of that so that there is that visibility in the cold months?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like we have cold weather gear. It's just, like you said, to walk around down Main Street to try and engage with somebody on the sidewalk, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, I suppose. But ideally, it's more of a warmer weather activity, but it can certainly be done, pending it's not 40 below.
Okay, sorry, that's me. I was just taking a lot of time. Any other questions? Go ahead, Joe.
In the enhanced agreement, that it stipulates that if officers, if there's emergencies, that the officers are taken off of their duties and taken away to deal with these emergencies. Has that been happening, and is that being tracked?
So what happens there, Joe, is like they're still required to help provide a safety-sensitive response. So that would simply mean if there was, say, like a priority call someplace outside of L'Orange, like out on, say, Far Reserve Road or something like that, there's a bad incident. And so those members would go and back up the other members from that are on the advanced positions. But there's no expectation that they carry any investigations outside of the town of L'Orange. So they would go and help sort of back up the other members, and then once they're clear of that, then they would go back to their regular substantive duties in the enhanced position.
Is that time being tracked as they're away?
It's not being tracked. I don't know. It would be pretty difficult to track, I suppose, but like in the spirit of the agreement, they're not supposed to carry files that aren't town files, and they don't.
But I guess we have no way of knowing how much time is actually spent away from what we were actually paying for, you know. I guess that's the point I'm trying to get.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, Joe. It would be very minimal. Like I said, their core function is to carry investigations for the town of L'Orange, and that's it, 100%.
It's not really a question there, Dean. Again, I appreciate you showing up here tonight, but more so in your foot patrols in regards to businesses, myself, with the long-standing business out in the industrial park, can you see time that the officers, enhanced or non-enhanced, just show that police presence in the industrial park? And if they have any suggestions in their night patrols that they've observed, just show that presence within the industrial park also, Dean, would that be possible to enter into the schedule?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Myself and Josh can do that too. Like, I'll absolutely come by and say hi and visit. Nothing wrong with that at all, but it's been good. Like, last year there was, with respect to business B&Es, year to date, as of, I guess towards the end of March, there was 19 residential break-in enters last year. And this year so far, knock on wood, we've had 0 reports of residential or business break-in enters. So I like that trend. I hope it continues. And again, I think that's kind of attributed to the guys just being out knocking on doors and holding people accountable.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions? No? Okay, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we finish up? We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, I'm at your disposal, guys, so if you have questions at all, just fire away.
Okay, I think that in the next coming weeks here, we'll have a bit clearer picture of what we're looking for, and we obviously are in consultation to try to understand it better and try to get some more deliverables just for us and for residents. So we'll hopefully be having that coming your way in the next couple of weeks here.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to connect with Steve last week or the week before, I guess, and sort of start that discussion, so that was really good.
Absolutely. I think Joe's got one more.
Yeah, and I guess last time you were here, we mentioned that you'd bring the officers in that are now being, you had a change of guard, and we've got the 3 new positions now. We would like to have them come to council and meet and just briefly just introduce themselves and maybe just tell us what they're going to bring to us, to our community. It's just a way to touch base.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And you know, Joe, anytime you want, if you're out and about, stop by the office for a coffee and, you know, shoot the breeze with you guys too. But you're more than welcome to come by anytime.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Dean. Appreciate your time.
All right, thanks, guys.
Have a nice
Good
evening. Okay, we'll move on to the SAMA delegation. And what is the person's name? I see Sam.
Sheldon. Sheldon should be on the line.
Sheldon. Hi, Sheldon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. The floor is all yours.
Oh, thank you so much. My name is Sheldon Satish. I'm the regional manager of SAMA, Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency. And we are the agency in the province that does the property assessments for Saskatchewan. And we're out of the Yorkton office, and we look after La Ronge in northern Saskatchewan. We have about 16 employees here, and some of them with 35 years, myself being experienced in 25 years of assessment. What I wanted the chance to present with you today is just a highlight of SAMA, our roles and responsibilities, purpose of our assessments, some of the assessment principles, the word revaluation and what that means, overview of the approach that we use predominantly in La Ronge, it's a cost approach, and then we'll talk about the shifts and the assessment shifts and some of the resources available there. So SAMA's role in assessment property taxation is defined by the Assessment Management Agency Act, and we are governed by a board agency. Now, part of our funding comes from for the governance of the assessment system in Saskatchewan. We lay out the foundation for municipalities to follow with property assessment. And that includes like our policy and research, quality assurance, our computer system, communication. We provide the system to operate for the province. And we have in our regional offices the Assessment Services Department, which actually does the service, does the inspections, the annual maintenance, the re-inspections, revaluations, supportive value. We're representing 770 out of 774 municipalities, so we don't do the City of Regina, Saskatoon, PA, and Swift Current, but we control the assessment procedures in Saskatchewan, so we do provide them with that foundation. Now, the connection here with assessment is that we're trying to reflect what's going on with property values. And all in all, the purpose of that is because we have an ad valorem taxation system. That is the method of property taxation based on property value. Now, that is widely across North America, widely used across North America, and it is, property taxation is the main source of revenue for municipalities to provide those services to the municipality or the ratepayers, what they want, what council wants. In Saskatchewan, it represents about $2.1 billion in property tax revenue, this assessment base. Now, we do provide, our property assessments provide the financial foundation for the property tax system. And of course, there's more reliance on the property tax system and less funding from governments, aging infrastructure and increasing costs. So now, some of the principles here that I wanted to chat about were, we're operating off of a base date. SAMA has a 4-year assessment cycle with revaluation. So last time we saw new values was in 2017. That reflected a 2015 base date. We have moved now to introduce this year, January 1st, 2019 base date. So these assessments will be used for the next 4 years. Essentially, it's an update to more current values, and you can see already it's 2 years behind. A lot of work goes into preparing these values. Now, I know in the simple fact is that people are thinking of values today. Sales that are in place after January 1st, 2019 cannot be used in our assessment. So considering the pandemic and where things are going, we cannot use that evidence. Court law does not allow us, whether it's gone up or down, to change change that rule. A couple other things that we operate under is that we're reflecting the conditions of the property, the physical conditions every year though, January 1st of each year. So if a person made a change to their property, added a garage, removed their building, removed the house, it's condition as of January 1st of every year, the physical condition, but it's reported back to the base date January 1st, 2019. We operate under market value standard, which is a connection to the market value of property. We also have a regulated property standard, which would mean there's values prescribed in an assessment manual to how they should be assessed, or the rates that they should be assessed at. And typical examples of that would be farmland, oil and gas, pipeline, heavy industrial properties like potash mines, and etc. With all this though, our main spotlight with assessments is providing equity. Now, as I mentioned, the market value standard is what we would follow with the values of properties in La Ronge for the most part. Now, and that's hinging on 4 pillars in this standard, is that we appraise property at a mass appraisal sense, which basically is a process of preparing an assessment for a group of properties as of a particular base date, using standard appraisal method, employing common data, and allowing for statistical testing. We do this in a fee simple interest, which is the absolute ownership unencumbered by other interests. And so if it was a leased property, we still assess it as a full bundle of rights. And we do this under typical market conditions for similar properties. So we're subject to the appraiser's discretion on comparability. And the final point is that we meet a quality assurance standard. So our assessments have to be targeted with accuracy, and it's basically within 5% of the median sale price, our assessment to sale price ratio for residential and all other groups of properties. Now, I have on here the mass appraisal versus fee appraisal. In our mass appraisal setting, most of us are trained in mass appraisal and fee appraisal. The main thing is that public recognizes the fee appraisal approach is the method that's used for lending purposes. The banks, you buy property, a fee appraisal is conducted, and that's where we take a more recent snapshot of what is going on. We look at direct comparable properties, maybe 4 or 6 properties that have sold in the last few months, and we're getting down to a specific value for that property. Mass appraisal is, as I mentioned, is we're valuing a group of properties on a model and using 4 years of sales and data to determine a model that we can apply to all properties in the community. So there's a big difference there between mass appraisal and fee appraisal. It leads us to the revaluation, and these are terms that SAMA uses as revaluation. It's different from what you may have heard in the past, re-inspection work. Revaluations is just bringing the values to a more current base date. Now, re-inspection work is what we did in 2018, if you recall, where we went to La Ronge and did a physical check of the data, updated it for changes that aren't reflected in the current records. So one is a computer update, the other one is an inspection update. And so this is what has occurred with our revaluations. It's province-wide with the revaluation, whereas re-inspection work is a community by community at a time. Now, with revaluation work goes assessment changes, and assessment changes leads to reconsidering what is going on with your tax policy. And this is just an example of, you know, how the taxable assessment is doubled in this example, but the budgetary needs remain the same. And that causes municipalities to have to reconsider their tax policies, and in this case, their mill rate. Your assessments are doubling, your budget's staying the same, the mill rate would need to be cut in half to remain revenue neutral, to say. Now, we deal with three approaches to value here. Three approaches to value, it would be in fee appraisal as well, cost approach, sales comparison, and the income approach. Typically, for most communities in Saskatchewan, we're using the cost approach. In some instances, we're using the income approach, which is pretty applicable with apartment properties. Now, a summary of the cost approach is that we're looking at separating out the land value from the building value. The land value, we're looking at vacant land sales, and the building value, we're operating off of replacement cost and applying depreciation for its wear and tear. And of course, we tie it back to the market values, and we call that a MAF. A MAF is applied back to the replacement cost. Simple highlights of the land values is that we're the connection between the municipality and land titles. We get all the transfers and pass them on to the municipalities. So we get a sales list, we verify sales, we determine what's arm's length and what's not. We only use sales that are valid market indicators. In this case, we just highlight here that we look at a price per square foot. And as I mentioned, in mass appraisal, we deal with, we're dealing with medians. We deal with medians because there's less reliance on properties that are considered outliers. So in this case, well, maybe $1.50 is on the high end and $1.13 is on the low end, but we're fixed on the middle land rate. Now, part of it, this was an example of one of the land rates for La Ronge, is that we have to shape the land rate according to what's reflective in the market. And we're recognizing that at some point the land rate stays constant, and then people start paying less and less and less for the larger parcels. And this is kind of on the idea of buying in bulk. The more you buy, the cheaper on average it gets. So we have to mirror that back to the market, is what ends up happening. And we see a curve as the parcel size gets larger. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And then how steep the curve is also a factor. I highlighted this because it's a neighborhood 190 is a new development in La Ronge. It's Robertson Drive. We didn't have this area segregated out last time with a different land rate because we had no sales, and now we do. And it's pretty consistent. It's a little bit higher than the core of La Ronge. It's about double the land value for the other neighborhoods surrounding it. We still have that lakefront neighborhood, and that rate has changed a little bit. In the end, we have to, as I mentioned, group similar properties together to develop land rates or MAF rates that reflect that market. And then we have to test that back. And that's the final test. One of the tests is to see how the model fits in relation to its sales of these known sales. Our aim is to hit a ratio of 1. The relationship between selling price and the assessment needs to hit plus or minus 5% of 1. Now, I'm moving on.
Sorry, can I just jump in here really quick, Sheldon? Just for in essence of time, I know that you guys that were here, or I think it was in March-ish, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, we were recently up there, yes, to do the inspections for you guys.
Great, so just, and I apologize if I'm gonna have to sort of cut you off a little bit short here, but just in essence of time, if we can sort of gear towards what your findings were in La Ronge, and then that way we can open up and have time for questions from council, if that's okay.
like our findings on your inspections? I mean, basically, it's a list of properties that you tell us to change because there's been changes to them, like if it's a garage or new house and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's provided in a report that we had sent to the municipality.
Were there any
Now-
major findings that you saw that we should really be made aware of, or anything that sort of?
Well, the maintenance is just the annual pickups, but when it comes down to the end values, yes, there's one highlight that I'd like to highlight to you. Neighborhood 400 is another land rate that is new, and that would be the properties north and west of Highway 102. So there's a specific land rate for those now. That's new from last reval. And the other one that I wanted to highlight is that we group these commercial properties into having a market adjustment factor connected to the local market sales. And that math factor has changed from 106 to 118. Now that's again reflective of what's going on in the Laurent market. Now, what isn't a part of the Laurent market is the motels and hotels. That's established off of a provincial market where we're looking at grouping communities comparable. So there's going to be some differences in the factors that are applied to the replacement costs of different commercial structures. That was these hotels, though, in the last 4 years, we're going to have a different factor because those were linked to the community in the past, and now they're linked to a bigger group of properties within the province. But in the end, one of the things also that I wanted to mention is the shifts that occur, because there's shifts that occur at a provincial level with different tax classes of property, and then of course what happens locally. And we highlighted in a trend report for you, what sticks out here is multifamily properties. In the province, they decreased 3%. In the Ronge, we have an increase of your multifamily that's 35%. Commercial went up 1, where in the province they went up 12. Residential stayed relatively neutral, where in the province it slid 7%. What that means to you, council, is that the multifamily, the taxable assessment, there's been a shift, and it accounts for more of the taxable assessment than it did in 2020. If you want to say it represents, each tax class represents a piece of the pie, multifamily is now representing more of that pie of taxable assessment. So you're going to see a shift onto multi-res and a decrease on the commercial. Part of that is attributed to, well, it's the local market, but also part of it we got to look at is the percentages of value change. Commercial property, railway, pipeline, elevators, they were taxed at 100% of the SAMA value. Now they're only going to be taxed at 85. So that's something else that you have to consider with the taxes or your mill rates and tax tools for 2021.
Okay, thank you very much. If we can open up some questions from council to you, if that's okay, just because we're really tight on time here. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Okay. You made reference to the lots on Robertson Drive as recognizing the higher cost of purchase. If you look at the history of the other lots that have been traditionally assessed very low, I think most of the assessments, the last time I looked, is around 14,000 for a residential lot. And I was wondering how they were going to deal with Robertson once that was recognized. But you've got to remember that those lots were developed by the province. There was a land assembly, they called it, I think, that came in and they developed all those lots. And then the town reduced the price to attract sales. But that doesn't change the value of that land. So when you're doing a comparison, to say that lots on Robertson are worth way more than the other lots, I think you got to I'm not sure, it just doesn't seem fair to me. Like, I always thought that land was being assessed quite low traditionally over the years. What's your?
Yeah, the core of La Ronge, it's slightly increased from, it's about $2.42, and it changed up to about $3.25, $3.30. But this Robertson area is selling for over $6 a square foot. So we're seeing about 25,000, 30,000, and in comparison to 48,000, 50,000 now.
Go ahead.
So when you're,
And
so I'm gonna just add on what Joe was saying, when you're making those assessments, you see, I can understand that increase of 50% per square foot. In that, there's value added that the town performed. They took that same lot, but they put value into that lot versus the other $3 a square foot. That individual, when he acquired that property from the town, he invested 10 to 15 to maybe possibly $20,000 into that piece of property. So I don't know where you people are getting your information from as far as assessing that at an increased value. Am I on the right line there, Joe?
Yeah, you are.
There's some difficulty in your strategy here in assuming that that property is selling for $40,000 and the property on Lawton Crescent sold for $14,000. That investor, he invested $22,000 to bring it up to that $40,000 value. So there's,
I guess if I could just add to that too, is when the town developed that, they did all the work and sold it as a finished product. The lots that were sold previously for low dollars required the owner to do that work, and that improvement isn't reflected in the final value of those properties.
Yeah, and so just to add to this, what we're using with this base date for sales, the indicators of market value, is actual prices. And we have to scrutinize the sales, whether or not they represent market value or not. But it's the same time period for each neighborhood. We're looking at a 4-year swath of sales, that it's 2018, 17, 16, and 50. So we're taking a look at those 4 years and what's happening with the prices of the property over there. We do see that this neighborhood is selling at a different rate from what the other neighborhoods are at, and so we have to look at the market conditions for these properties. All that comes into play is whether or not get the property to a developable state where somebody could actually put a house on it. That's taken into consideration as well. If there was a house that needed a demolition, just like in the Oldville and the older areas, well, that's the part of the acquisition that goes towards getting the lot at where they need it to be. A vacant lot, there's a cost of say $8,000 or whatever it is to remove a house to get it to that state.
Did you have time to add?
In the end, we're not talking about sale prices that have occurred way long ago. It's more recent, and it would be a struggle definitely if there was no sales, and we'd have to go back and see whether or not there's a time trend that occurred or not.
Just to remind council, I mean, if the property owner does not like their assessment, they can appeal it. We're all human, we do make mistakes from time to time. So if the assessment's gone up, they don't feel it fair, they do have the opportunity to appeal it. They pay the appeal fee, and if they win their appeal, i.e. their values go down, they get their appeal fee back. So it's not like they're not stuck with an option to try and bring it down. I just want to remind council that.
Abby?
So I have a couple of questions, but one of the big ones from a resident perspective. The town of La Ronge, from my understanding, is assessed differently than the village of Arange. And I'm wondering if you can talk through how that works. Why does our assessment land so much higher than the village? and
Well,
even
remember-
into the Northern District.
One of the things with the market value standard is that we have to value properties in their mass appraisal. And in our third point here is reflecting typical market conditions for similar properties. What we're seeing with Larange and Arange is that they each are selling land and buildings at different rates. So we're saying within the different areas, we are recognizing location as being an important factor to why people pay what they pay. And we see that. We see that in the land rates, and we see that in the prices of houses. We actually, when it comes to the commercial assessments though, the commercial, they're more similar than the residential, and we do group Larange and Arange together.
Okay, but I'm just trying to like really understand how it works in your office when you're doing these calculations. Am I correct that the town of Larange is, you know, a factor of whatever, and then the village is considered a factor of whatever when it comes to these math, yeah. Is that correct? And therefore, a building that is a single-family bungalow on a 50 by 100 lot in Larange is going to be valued higher or assessed higher than the exact same home, model, year, everything, on the exact same lot in Arange.
I don't know, like how, you know, I honestly don't have the report for Arange in front of me. I recall through the appeal processes last spring, Arange and Larange are at different land rates. I can't quite remember what the market adjustment factor differences are last time and this time, but that Arange represents the sales that occurred in Arange. The Larange represents the sales that occur in Larange. So it is what it is. There's enough data in each community to segregate those out.
Really? Because we're a kilometer and a half away?
I can add something,
Yeah,
Mr. Mayor,
yeah,
for councilors' knowledge. So I have pretty good knowledge of the assessment
Yeah.
system. I've had, in my past experience, a property A right next door to property B, math of 130, math of 70, and they were right against each other. Like, there's a lot of details that go into those math calculations. And it's not just two different communities. It's actually, literally in this case, it was actually two different properties side by side, had two different maps. I asked a question, they gave me a long-winded answer. But it's not necessarily two different communities. It's actually literally could be just abutting, even within Larange, I know for a fact there's about 5 or 6 different maps, I believe, in Larange for different neighborhoods that's set by the market value. So it's a really tricky question to ask at the top.
Yeah, we kind of skipped over the improvement side of the calculation and how the math works, but essentially we have to mirror what these people are purchasing properties, and this is what they got, and this is the replacement for cost for what they bought, and we have different things that go into those replacement costs. One of them is being quality, and so we have to mirror what is going on and model this relationship between selling price and depreciated replacement cost.
So, sorry, Joseph.
I'm gonna be able to answer Abby's question because I built a spec house in Arange and in Larange within a year apart, and they both sold for the same price. So when the assessment roll is open, we'll be able to look at both of those properties, and we will have our question answered.
Yeah, and the thing with some of this is also we are not just looking at one sale. We're looking at multiple sales. So I'll stress that, you know, probably with a newer build, there's a high likelihood that you're getting something closer to your replacement cost. But the problem is when we have older properties that are renovated, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Different markets have different pressures, supply and demand on them. So you might have, you know, a different relationship between a new build, which only can be afforded by certain people, or there could be a different style of home and a different price range that is widely affordable. And there's more competition, more demand, and we're seeing between these properties different relationships and essentially different maths. And you're right, we have, in this case in La Ronge, we have 5 different maps. And we have over 100 sales in La Ronge, and that's well enough to model that many different factors.
Jordan McPhail here. First thing is more of a point of interest, maybe kind of directed towards administration on this level. So I think part of the confusion that we're having at the table right now is more so, or is around the valuation differences between, you know, a similar property between La Ronge and Erin through those different maps. But ultimately, when it comes down to a budgetary talking, what the resident will see at the end of that process is an increase or decrease in their taxes based on the assessment of the property. So to me, if you take a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house, or a single floor bungalow, or a trailer in a residential area, and as long as the scale is whatever, if the house, let's say the 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom large scale house, that is, let's say the mansion of the areas, and then you go to the next level, if it's only 33% of the value, but it doesn't matter whether it's in Erin or La Ronge, it should still have the same net effect on the taxes. When it comes down from assessed value down to what the resident will see on their tax bill.
Yeah.
So the second part to my question, or I guess if that's cleared up, then the only question that I would have remaining, Sheldon, would be in relation to what you might be seeing in the town of La Ronge limits. Do we see a proportionate increase or decrease amongst all properties? Do we see certain classes of properties with a higher than proportionate increase in the higher end value homes compared to a middle of the road kind of value home? Are you able to foresee any of those? Just so we can have those kind of discussions before we go into our budget, which is coming up later, and when we go in and set our tax, we might have to look at that base rate to make sure that we keep it even throughout our municipality.
Yeah, well, one of the things, I mean, you can see evident in this, if this is displaying, I hope it is, this slideshow, is that the residential properties, the total taxable assessment has stayed relatively neutral. But you're right, I mean, there's a different level of shift that goes on to different qualities of properties, different types of properties. And we do provide a new report there in the package that we've supplied with the revaluation. It goes property by property to show what the percentage change is. But I'm thinking what might be helpful for you is maybe like a heat map of showing like different colors for the changes, and ones that are 5% or 10% increases in this color, and another color for a more serious change, and opposite. So I'm guessing something like a heat map would maybe be a good idea to provide for you then.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, to wrap this up just quickly.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, in any revaluation year, there's always going to be winners and there's going to be losers. We set our budget tomorrow, that's when we need to generate for taxes. He's indicated the multi-unit, a few others are going up. What we need to do is play around with our tax tools to readjust those tax burdens, so we're not putting, per council's wish, more burden on one property class than another. So at the end of the day, if you want to stress, we only generate off of whatever they produce for assessment, what we need for taxes.
Right.
And we play around with the tax tools. So we make sure at the end of the day we come out fairly neutral as much as we can.
So I guess that the closing question I would have for Sheldon is, you had said that, I believe the number was 35% increase in the multifamily units. Is that a proportion of total taxes generated, or that you've seen the multi-dwelling units increase in assessment by 35%?
Yeah, so our assessed values of multifamily properties in 2020 was 37 million. 37.6 million, that jumps up to almost 51 million for 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Sheldon, you mentioned, just as a point of interest here really quick, were you wanting us to reference the slideshow while you were talking there? Can you guys not see my slideshow? No, so I think if it's possible, I don't know if you can send that over to us, just because maybe that would really help us, I think, to get an idea, just so that we're not just hearing you sort of present it all, and then we'll be able to dive in a little bit more and be able to ask, and maybe understand a little bit more on our own time. But just for the essence of time is this moment, we're sort of exhausted for the delegation. But I want to thank you very much for your time. And then yeah, if that's something that you're able to present to us, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'll gladly provide the slideshow to you guys. And I'd like to provide you with a heat sink map showing you where the hot spots are, or what, as far as changes go.
Sure, that would be great and really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, Sheldon. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Okay, moving on. We're moving on to reports from administration. I don't believe there's any outside sources, so we're moving on to administration, which is, we'll start with the Town of La Ronge state of the address issue reports. Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, very quickly, Council. So the mayor and I have been conversing on this for the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've done this in lots of different municipalities. And typically the format works is that we provide a quarterly address to the residents virtually, and of course with COVID. We've done these in person in the past, but of course can't do that right now. And the format I've done in the past with council and mayor is the councilors provide things for the mayor to address and make sure you get across. And the mayor typically does the address and make sure it's about the council, it's about the community, it's about priorities, it's about budget, getting information out there. Now the mayor and I did discuss that if council's open to it, we could look at another format and have council speak at it as well, but the problem with that is in terms of time and getting different people across, but if that's council's wish to have every councilor come out and they say a few things too. But it's just it's a communications tool to get going, and of course the dates, they're on that poster, it's strictly draft, I just put it on there for discussion. If council's agreeable to it, I work with the mayor to kind of come up with some dates, and we do it probably using the Zoom platform so everybody can see it, put a recording up, and basically just start pushing out some of the stuff that the council and the town is working on, and make sure that everybody's in the loop in the community.
So I'd like to add just a little something to this. I kind of foresee it including as many councilors as possible in the first one. I think it'd just be a nice way to sort of just be present again in all of our residents' eyes, if you so wish. If you don't, that's fine. And then moving forward, we can make it a little more streamlined if you like. And we could even do it on a rolling basis too, where we maybe have one councillor added, to each one. That way it can sort of rotate. That way it doesn't become so cumbersome. Of course, this is new. I've never done anything like this either. So it can kind of be whatever structure we kind of want it to be. But at least you can guide us with what you've done in the past. Councillor Bashara also sort of mentioned about doing some professional photos, which I agree with you. Because all we have, this is literally pulled from like an iPhone photo, and also like we have our changeover day where we were all brought into office, and just nothing too professional. We can probably definitely bring it up to a different level. I agree with you 100% on that. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to add, or if they think this is a good idea, bad idea?
I think it's a great idea. I'm a little concerned. I don't know how much audience we're going to get on a Thursday over the noon hour. People are busy. Definitely would like to see something in the evening for sure. And if we were, depending on what the COVID guidelines are at the time, we could do like a blended model where we have the Zoom, or at the same time, let's say we did it like in a space we could physically distance. We could maybe, I don't know, the Uniplex is empty, the Kitchen App is empty, set up like a little panel area where we can sit. And if people want to attend in person, they can, following COVID guidelines, of course, and then the rest can click on online. Right?
I'm not sure that's possible with the changes upcoming to the health orders.
But down the road, potentially, right?
Yeah.
Like the blended
Yeah.
model would be good, because I don't disagree with you. I think it's
Yeah.
nice. Like technology really opens it up to some people, but also not everyone has technology, right? So,
Right.
but
Like a
yeah,
blended model.
I think especially with what's coming down the pipeline, I think initially it might be difficult. Anything else? Any other additions?
No, I look forward to it.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like the idea too of council interaction there too. Just the opportunity to speak a little history in a sense, and where the direction that we hope to steer the community in moving forward.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
The way I see it, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'll go.
The way I see it happening, and can be rather beneficial too, is if there is some questions that we are seeing coming out of your service tracker, you know, in ways that we can kind of say how we're actioning these items and going through the processes. It also might give us an opportunity for each board to kind of present on behalf of the town what we see, like invite the board chairs from all of our outside boards and committees, and maybe some managers, those kinds of things. I mean, if it was every meeting, it might be a little lengthy to be able to have all of those inquiries kind of added, but if we can kind of theme one of those boards at each time, that would give another, you know, if we go through our list, we'll give every councillor an opportunity. You know, if we say, you know, the first quarter is the quarter we discuss the fire services and the regional water. The second quarterly meeting is when we talk about the state of the town, as well as the Woodlands and Waterways Regional Visitor Center and waste management. And kind of go through in that model so that we're giving at least an annual update from the boards and committees that we sit on, as well as providing a quarterly update for where the town is at.
I think that would be great. I'm just wondering, let's say we did go with this proposed date. Will we have Ryan's strategic plan that we worked on, will we have that document by then? Like that would be a great time, and even if we don't, to share some of those highlighted pieces, which are going to be our priorities, just so everyone knows what to expect in the coming months and years.
It'll be back, Councillor, by April 27th.
Okay, so we'll have it then. So that might be a great opportunity to present that and share that with the
I
town.
think there's gonna be a lot of good items to discuss, strategic plan and all that. There'll be
Yeah.
lots of good stuff to get up there for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know, just so they don't think we're just like meeting, talking, but like, we have a plan, right? We can't tell you what that plan is yet. No, I'm just kidding, joking.
Okay, anything else to this? No, I think it's good. Thank you for the recommendations, Stephen. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to waste management bylaw review report. Pass that back to you again.
Yeah, very quickly, this is just to give council an update that we've got some issues with the waste management bylaw. I've identified a few. We've got things that came up in my first week or two where Councillor Watt is knowledgeable about one where we had a group home that kind of staff were taking an interpretation on that they needed to have a metal bin put there, and to me I classify as residential, so I allowed them to have a roll-up bin versus a metal bin. It wasn't crystal clear in the bylaw in terms of that interpretation, so anyways, we solved it by putting a roll-up bin. It just needs a bit of interpretation. The enforcement language in there is loose. I've actually got practical experience on that. Plus, we have properties in the community that are getting 3-4 bins, roll-up bins, only paying for one. So to go through and clean that up and make sure we get it done. And also, we have some commercial properties, large commercial properties in town that are only paying $40 a month for garbage and getting free dumping at the landfill. Yes, so there's a little bit of cleanup to happen and get it all right-sized. So I just wanted to give council a heads up, specifically the deviation from the bylaw here on the group home, so.
And just further history or further context to that, when it comes to the Waste Management Corporation and what's going on there, it's a really good time to start, to really have a look at our own, because the Waste Management Corporation is going through the process of writing and adopting new bylaws, because the Northern District partners are going to be coming on with the new landfill when that opens. So by hopefully summer, we're going to have the bylaws all sorted out to the new, organizational structure and so on and so forth, and the way that fees are charged. So like everything's being looked at, it's all being unpacked, and the way that structures are right now with fees and everything, it's kind of by convention, and just the 3 partners, it was working fine, but we're opening up Pandora's box with everything now that we have so many people, so many partners at the table to look at. So it's all getting, when Joe and I have more updates, we're gonna be able to bring the new bylaws, the proposed bylaws to council to be able to get a good understanding, or at least have administration review, to make sure that they work for us as a partner and go from there.
What was the date of that old bylaw?
2007, I believe.
Because I think at that time,
Names on it.
the town was in control of everything. We actually, in that bylaw, it says, we will not accept cardboard at the landfill. Well, it's not our landfill anymore, it's a regional landfill.
Yeah, there's pieces of legislation that are in the bylaw too, Councillor, that don't exist anymore. It just needs to be cleaned up.
I believe I was like third in line.
Oh, sorry.
No? Okay, so, the question I have, like, this is obviously coming to the town as our own, within our boundaries, waste management, rather than the overarching regional and what is coming into the regional landfill. So, the question I have, and maybe you have some experience from working in a few cities and larger centers throughout Saskatchewan as well, is there typically within the waste management bylaw, it doesn't matter what the site looks like after 4 units in one household or 4 units in one structure, that you have a metal bin that is, you know, a single place and you aren't charged your $10 enviro fee and you have to have a commercial pickup point? And do you know what that average would be? I mean, the examples that I would see is if we go down, you know, Studer Street, there's a lot of multi-dwelling units that have front-facing front doors that could technically be their own individualized units, but the entire complex also generates, you know, 20 bins all along the same, and as far as like picking up and dumping and whatnot, if we're looking at trying to, you know, do best bang for the buck and make sure that, you know, we're hitting all residents in a timely manner, would there be any need, do you see, going into the bylaws and having that discussion on capping, like after 4 units or after 3 units, it doesn't matter what your site looks like, you will have to go to a commercial bin?
I've done it before, so that's coming up to that criteria, and it's very difficult to do, because ultimately, at the end of the day, somebody's gonna get singled out, right?
Right.
And it's just a matter of pulling the Band-Aid off, and you have to do a little bit of research to get to that point, and there is a cutoff point where, yes, you have a metal bin, like the group home was the best example, and I talked to him, Robbie talked to him, it's not designed for metal bin. They had nowhere to put it, even the contractor was saying, we have nowhere to put the metal bin. It was designed for a roller bin. So that, it's difficult to sit there and put a target on, because you've got a place like that was designed for a roller bin. Right? Even though it's, I believe it's 4 or 6 units, group home, that's that difficulty there in terms of making that determination. Even the contractor, like I said, building the metal bin, she even said, we can't put a metal bin there.
So if I can, when those sites are put in for development permit, is that a consideration into the development as to how that happens? Was this something that was missed, or?
We know that actually, to be honest, Councilor, in my experience, most group homes have roll bins.
Okay.
Right, and I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head in the other centers I worked in that has a metal bin for a group home. It's just aesthetically and just for the overall design, they need more space in front. Again, it's difficult to come up with a thing. I know in previous locations, all commercial buildings like apartments and all that, you know, large units that you have lots of space, you can put metal bins in there. Like we just pulled the bag up, so you're not getting them anymore, right?
Right.
So we'll dig into it. We'll try and come up with something. There's a lot of moving parts in the bylaw here that it's going to be difficult to kind of come up with a fair and equitable means to come out of this, because it's designed for operating a landfill right now. It's not designed to be a standalone waste management.
Right.
Okay, thank you, and then we'll go to No, okay, sorry.
Yeah, just a little history on the environmental fee. That originally was started when recycling, Mel Haglund and a group of people started recycling, and then the town kind of took it over. And basically it was like $2 or $3 a month of it just to kind of subsidize it. But it sort of evolved, and we started to recognize, and that's when we formed a region. We used that environmental fee as a way to generate more money. It was, rather than put it just on the tax base or like on the general revenue, we felt it would be more equitable to distribute it more widely than just by taxpayer day. And so we increased it, and I think it's about $10 a month right now.
Mhm.
But that's what it's for, it doesn't entitle anybody to, like, commercial, or anybody to, because everybody pays it. So it was meant to just a source of revenue for the town to address our share of the cost of the landfill. So just for understanding.
And just for clarity too, a couple issues with that particular group home. I think there should be, within the bylaw, and I know we, bylaws and policies, but they were attempting to get this group home into operation. Yes, multiple dwelling in a group home, but they're starting off with one, 8 months to a year from now, they may start off with the second one. So there was a little bit of confusion there. But it also brings it up to another level, and I think Jordan was alluding to it somewhat, within your building agreement. Is the building designed in such to hand, say it's a fourplex, can you accommodate 4 bins? Or if it's a larger group home, I don't know, in the design of that building, how, when SUMA, or sorry, Municode, when they're looking at that particular building, is waste management included? That I don't know.
No, I
It should be looked at.
I guess if you're talking about commercial, I guess we have to define what is commercial and what isn't. You know, if it's a 24 suite apartment, or it's a, you know, where do you draw the line of, you know, to label it as a commercial entity?
Yeah, it's very tricky, because if you look at Lawrence Avenue, there's commercial properties along there. They have roll beds, I don't know what them do, but yet they have no space for a metal bin. That's the same issue we had in our Battleford along the main drag there. There was nice insurance businesses there that didn't have enough space to throw a metal bin on, so they got a roll bed. So that, it's really difficult to make that determination, because at the end of the day, as soon as you say metal bins for all commercial properties, the ones that have low frontage out here are gonna be very difficult to put a metal bin in, even in the back, because of course, as soon as you put it in the back, you've got people throwing stuff in there and all that, and some businesses get up in arms a little bit.
Yeah, I don't understand, if you're a commercial business and you're paying the $10 fee, and you only produce enough waste to fill one roll open, then what's the big deal? It's about the volume of waste, right? Because under the new landfill, for sure, it's going to be based on cubic meters or tonnage for the charges that we incur. So the less waste that is generated, the better. But there's also going to be at the landfill a whole discussion about commercial versus residential waste, so whether it's our truck dropping it off, or if it's a commercial provider that's transporting waste. So
I guess if we're gonna rewrite the bylaw, the way I see it is we're gonna have to identify where that line is, whether, you know, fourplex is residential or whatever that level is before considered commercial.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Council. The other thing is, we gotta make sure if we start turning off the commercial side and make them go to metal bins, we also gotta make sure the regional landfill is updated their bylaws and charges, and making sure they're charging the appropriate amount too, in terms of picking up the garbage and going out there, right? So there's inconsistency in application, because we've got some commercial on the Raj Avenue right now, they're getting picked up and getting charged at the landfill. We got other commercial ones that are not. So we just gotta make sure we're consistent across the board if we treat commercial the same.
Okay, any further discussion?
no.
No? Okay. Before I forget, I want to add in, can we go to the land lease? I just forwarded you guys the email, so it's right at the top of your email so that we don't miss that in the report. So, Robbie, are you on the line?
Yeah, here.
Okay, so if we can go to that, the issue report regarding the fence installed in municipal reserve, please.
Oh, do we need to make a recommendation about the
Waste management, yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Did
Sorry.
anyone else lose their AllNet or just me?
Sometimes if it's inactive, they just have to do a refresh on it.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna have this.
I will recommend that at our next meeting, that administration bring forward an updated waste management bylaw.
I'll
Or-
second that.
Future meeting.
Future meeting, please.
I'll second that,
Yes,
yeah.
future meeting. I think getting it in line with Waste Management Corporation, because it's getting close with the bylaws, and having the discussion while that's ongoing will help fine tune everything.
Good with that?
We're going to a fence, but I see salary continue.
Sorry, there was an addition to the agenda before you got here.
Oh, okay,
Sorry.
no worries.
So
We got that
that's-
in an email, right?
Yeah, and I just forwarded it to everyone, so it should be at the top of your email, hopefully.
I agree with the motion too.
Thanks, Ryan.
I do see there's in camera, is that an in camera discussion?
Oh, lovely. Yeah,
Oh.
that was in cameras and the other matter as well.
One that you sent at 7:15.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. Is that for in-camera discussion, the bylaw,
Fence?
the fence?
It's just got the address and has no names on it or anything like that, so it's public
Okay.
knowledge.
Okay, so Robbie, we'll go to you, please.
Sorry, did everyone get a chance to look at the report?
Yes.
Yes.
The
So,
aerial shot helped. Thank you.
Say again?
The aerial shot helped really define what we're talking about. So thank you
Yeah,
for
so
that.
basically, yeah, so it's just brought to our attention that there are some properties in Orange Avenue that have some fences on municipal reserve. So this is just the first one, kind of on, not first one, but one of the ones that was brought up, and we're trying to address the situation. I guess the fence has been there for many years, but it is part of a shoreline policy and the lease agreement. They cannot restrict private access to public municipal reserve. That's kind of all the stuff that's in the lease agreement that the property owner signs every year. So in order to approve the 2021 shoreline lease, we can't really approve it knowing that there's an encroachment issue.
Any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Or
Go.
basically, I sent them a letter of order to remedy to remove the fence from the property. I don't know exactly how far it encroaches onto the municipal reserve, but measurements would have to be probably taken, and a survey would have to be done for exact location.
Go ahead, Abby.
Okay, as the person who actually drafted this policy under the direction of the last council, I just want to point out that this was not necessarily the intent is to like go after hard some folks that have had they've been using a municipal reserve as they enjoy the ability to use the municipal reserve as a sort of extension to their property. There's people, landowners in town that have flagrantly developed municipal reserve and gone as far as bringing in fill and altering the shoreline. And that's what this shoreline policy is meant to address, to be able to give, back up, sorry. A little history on the shoreline policy. It is within our official community plan and zoning bylaw that the town would adopt such a policy, period, right? Whatever council wanted it to look like at the time. And there was an extensive discussion and extensive consultation, or an attempt at consultation. I won't say that it was done perfectly, but all landowners that have municipal reserve leases were provided with letters and an opportunity to comment on this. One of the biggest issues that was debated was to be able to write into this policy a little bit of accommodation for those that have enjoyed the use of that municipal reserve for the last 40 years. So, of our shoreline use policy, I don't know if you guys have it in front of you, but in its entirety, it should be read in its entirety, like every other policy or bylaw. You must look deep, because there's clauses that will alter the meaning or at least shift the meaning of other clauses. So I want to point out that 7.1, municipal shoreline parcels should be preserved for public use and are not encouraged to be exchanged or sold except where a defensible case can be made presenting the land is not valuable as part of the public inventory. That one's just one to keep in context, right? 7.8, upland shoreline leases shall ensure that, C, public access will be maintained. However, where warranted by the use provided in the lease, landscaping or other means to manage public access onto that portion of municipal reserve may be part of the agreement, okay? There is a clause, access and municipal use, that says 7.14, public access to dedicated lands shall not be restricted by a lessee or permittee. That is based on the Planning and Development Act, or no, dedicated lands regulations. But there was an interpretation that there is landscaping can be part of restriction of access. 7.19, existing lessees and permittees may continue to enjoy the same privileges as existed prior to the adoption of this policy, as long as the use and valid lease or permit is maintained without interruption of more than 2 months. Okay? That was the big one that had to go in there, because there's people that have been using the property that is not being used for public land and not being altered, that have had that for 40 years. And then 7.21, the town of La Ronge will make every effort to work with existing leases to bring their lease sites and uses into conformance with this policy. So slapping an order on a resident seems a little harsh. So I don't feel like, based on the report that we've gotten, that there was a reasonable attempt to offer the landowner, the lessee, an opportunity to go through some of the accommodations in the policy and present their case. So I will leave it there.
Robbie?
I'd just like to add, there's other properties that were going through enforcement issues, so we're trying to enforce them equally across all the properties. Someone built a fence not on their property as per the requirement. They have to develop their property only. As per their lease agreement, they sign annually. They cannot restrict access to the property. There's an inherent issue that if one of the property owners sells the property, well, the backyard looks a whole lot bigger, but it's not their property. So just treating all properties equal. I believe we should follow the shoreline lease, and I did reach out to the property owner, so you do have a fence encroachment issue. If council wants to favor one more than the other for different issues, that's up to council decision.
We're okay to go to you, and then we'll go back to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna weigh into this on an interpretation issue in light of the information that's just been put forth by Councillor Bashara here, Robbie. Your interpretation of equality throughout, I think you failed in your analogy of that situation and the fence in question. Again, it's open to interpretation. I mean, this is a long-standing resident within our community. We've heard terms of enjoy. Well, I don't think in this particular situation, it wasn't enjoying, it was securing that property of 25 years ago. And now we're saying, sorry, policy states this. It's not black and white. Pardon me?
No, I was going to say, as per the lease agreement they signed annually, they agree to not restrict access, which in fact they do. And currently we have a similar issue with another property for the exact same reason. They want to restrict access to their private property.
Sorry, my friend.
So I'm just trying to.
Sorry, my friend. That fence went up prior. That fence went up prior to the policy changes. So.
It's not a policy. This is the lease agreement.
Or your lease agreement. Your lease agreement. Interpret it however which way you want. But again, I find it rather difficult when people have had to secure their piece of property of 25 years ago, and now we're stating because of you want to renew this lease annually, that these changes have to be made. Has there been public pressure for our bylaw officer to go down there? Or has he arbitrarily decided to go down and enforce something because of the policy?
I was given previous direction by previous administration to look after these issues. So I'm just doing it as council previously directed. If council wants to make changes to the agreement or sell the property, but we have a person who developed off the property, shouldn't be different than anyone in any residential district or commercial district, regardless of the property. If you're developing a fence on someone else's property, I'm just trying to adhere to the rules.
So first off, I appreciate, Robbie, your concerted efforts to implement policy. It's not easy, and I know that it's a thankless job. So the effort is appreciated, and I understand that you have received direction about that. But I do need to state that it's council that will interpret policy and the application of policy, correct? Where there's gray areas, that's council's role to interpret. Or am I
Do you want to weigh in
incorrect?
on that?
So I'm just gonna jump in here. So regardless to the shoreline leases or anything like that, and I've been in other municipalities where not necessarily shoreline issues have come up. The issue for me when I read the report is the fence has been built outside property lines. And in previous municipalities, we have asked the property owner to take the fence back years after it was built, because in this case, there was no permit hold. And in Humboldt, we did it. Somebody built the property 4 feet into a municipal reserve. 3 years later, came back, and the only reason we didn't catch it is there was no permit hold. So that's, to me, is black and white. So the shoreline lease, I agree there's probably some interpretation items, and that's what we're having discussion here tonight, is the shoreline. But when I read the report and Robbie pulled the information, there was no permit pulled for the fence. So, we're not talking about altering the entire property, we're about bringing the fence back on to the property line.
Was a fence permit required at the time that it was put up?
We can't find anything back in the day in terms of the requirement on the
I don't
fence.
know if fences were a development that needed to be permitted in our basic planning statement. So prior to 2016,
Fence permits were required,
fence permits were required? Okay,
as per the previous zoning bylaw. And she didn't know when the fence was installed. I did get a date.
Like 20 years ago. Where Madison
That's what
Fence-
she said, yes.
Joe, is there anything else you want to add there?
Well, I'm not exactly, I don't know, I'd like to find a way that we don't have to remove that fence. It was put up there for security reasons. Years ago, there was a lady that was lit on fire in behind that property and burnt, and since then, there's been other incidents that happened, vandalism. If you have a fence farther back from the buildings, if you look at that aerial map, you're not restricting public access. They don't have to be every square foot of that. They can walk the shoreline, it's not restricting them from doing that. If you can get the people back so they can't hide behind buildings, maybe we'll restrict some of the activities that are going on in that area. So I think sometimes there's a positive thing that's in regard to that fence. It not only protects the property, but it also diminishes the activity in that area.
Okay, we're gonna go Jordan, Ryan, and then.
I'll go with that for now.
Okay, Ryan, go, sorry, I'm gonna try to start doing this counselor veteran thing. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say, so if we're going to extend people's properties, which I have no problem with, then they should have to just the property. Because we are missing out on tax base there. We're basically giving away property for free that is not theirs.
How do you see that? How do you see that? How do you see that we're giving them property? We're not giving anybody anything. We're now denying access to security. And thank you very much, Joe, for bringing that up. There was a loss of life. A young female was burnt to death in her backyard. And to prevention of this, the lady secures her property by putting up a fence. She's not asking for that property. She goes to sell her real estate there. That's not a part of her property. It's a non-surveyed piece of property. We're not giving anybody nothing. We're giving them the opportunity to secure their property where there was loss of life.
So I would like to add to that, so my property, I can start going into the back then because I have no bush, or I have bush there, so does that give me right to continue my property into the back and start building fences around my property to keep people from getting burnt back there?
Sorry, go ahead.
I think Ryan was reading my mind. I have very much the same attitude, and I do sympathize with what happened there. So I see alternatives being, we either gift that property to that property owner, we sell it to them, right? Or we take it back, because Ryan is right, that doesn't stop any of us from extending our property because of whatever reason. Like, I've had bears behind my yard, I've had people walking behind my yard, I have people trying to walk in and break into my shed behind my yard. So can I extend my property and just let it be? And I respect the fact that there's a historical basis for that. But our policy, this policy written September 2019, if we're not going to follow it, then we have to change it. Because if we don't follow it for one person, then I guess we don't follow it for anyone, right?
And
It has to be fair.
And it's also very confusing for Robbie to be able to do his job properly, and we have to be consistent, so that's our job here at this table to do that.
Mr. Mayor,
Sorry.
too.
Thank
Like,
you.
I believe there's two other property owners here that were also talking, this originated out of another property owner that has had some complaints from adjacent neighbors on the fence. So, again, this is not just as simple as one property, it's treating everybody the same way. So he's not taking issue right now, he's not happy about the enforcement of the fence going to the water line. But, and he's getting some, he's getting enforced as well. So there's three property owners getting enforced at the same time right now.
I have to point out that we are way far off base when it comes to the actual issues that we have in front of us. Number one, we have a property owner that developed after 2013 that developed municipal reserve, and finally there was enforcement measures taken about the extent of development that was happening on municipal land. That, in turn, resulted, I believe, in a complaint about a neighbor, which does have a fence encroaching on municipal reserve. On that particular item, this one in front of us, that fence has been there for 20 years, and that person is an elder in our community. And I'm saying that we just need to look at the context, the individual context of each one, to be able to understand if pursuing a hard order to comply is the right action to take in this, when we have a distinct clause in our policy saying that we need to work with landowners. And the last council has made every effort to work with the first landowner that was having an enforcement issue. Third, there is a third property, and I have a personal relationship with, friendship with the owner of that property. That property has literally had that municipal reserve to their use for 40 years. 40 years, it's been dedicated municipal reserve, but when that property was built, it was always, there's a chain link fence, for example. But that's because there are a lot of users of drugs and drinkers and people having sex in the municipal property right adjacent. And they are just trying to and that person spends every spring, 3 days, cleaning up that bush behind that building. That's not their.
Sorry, I just got,
Brian.
Councilor Battery, do you have something?
Yeah, I would say, like, in the incident of Trey, that was her name, who got burnt behind the building. That is a policing matter. We can throw up all the fences we want. It's still not going to stop. If the council sees fit to gift the property, I don't have any issue with that. But to just, go ahead and let what's happened happen is just asking for more people to say, well, why can't I do that then?
Robbie?
I was just going to add the previous comment to the other property. I believe it also has 2 strands of barbed wire at the top. So it's not just a simple fence.
The one we're talking about tonight? Okay.
Not the one tonight, but the other one that you referenced.
So I want to weigh in here really, really quick, because we have to be really careful with our emotions here, because our job is to look at the policy and create it and help our staff follow it and enforce it and whatever they need to do. So I get that there's a lot of emotion behind these. I truly do. And I also have not been in this town for long enough to have seen a lot of those things, right? But we have to remember, if we aren't happy with the policy, guys, here, this is our job, okay? So let's come up with solutions and ideas of how we can let Robbie be able to do his job a little bit clearer so that we aren't having to deal with these situations in this way. Sorry, Robbie just had his hand up just quickly before you. Go ahead, Robbie.
I was just gonna say, I mean, the previous property owner that I was referring to has previously wrote a letter to administration requesting purchasing the land. I don't know the outcome of that conversations, but I mean, that's an option there to sell the land.
It was
Land to
refused,
these properties.
it was refused at administration level and wasn't even brought to council, so
Was this previously?
this is previous council, I believe,
Okay.
around the time of transition maybe, but, that's beside the point. I think I might be towing the line on conflict, so I don't wanna get into specifics on any other properties, but the one in front of us, I want to propose that based on our policy and what we have in front of us, the clause is that existing lessees may continue to enjoy the same privileges as existed prior to the adoption of this policy because they've maintained the lease, from what I understand, every year they renew their lease. We will make every effort to work with the existing leases, and that where warranted, other means to manage public access onto that portion of municipal reserve property may be part of the agreement. I would suggest that, out of respect for the elder in this community, I don't think the timeline is going to be lengthy. I don't know how to say that nice, like, I think it might be beyond our term.
Over a short time.
Yeah, I believe that having a clause in the lease that says that any new property owner must remove that fence as a condition of sale, or that lease will not be, and every landowner that purchases a property or inherits a property must do their due diligence, that's on them, right? So, not knowing the issue is not going to be.
So we're just going to go to Councilor McDonald, come to you.
So, as a member of council that sat in the deliberations when we were redefining what our shoreline use was going to be, I distinctly remember, and Huey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, as you were sitting at that table at that time as well, we had a discussion that any new development would have to fall under the shoreline use development of what we had drafted at that day, and that when there was a change in ownership or a new development put in place, so if this fence becomes decrepit and needs to be replaced, that it would have to conform at that point to the new shoreline use development policy at that time, and that the lessee would not have to tear up their yards at that point when we passed the bylaw. That the intention was that if their fence became decrepit or, vandalism or whatnot, that when they put in that development permit, obviously would have to trigger a fencing bylaw, and at that point enforcement measures can be taken to say that the rest of the fence had to be removed and brought back onto your own property. If I'm mistaken, then please correct me, but I do believe that that's what is the case, which would, where the policy may be silent, and this is where it can be open to interpretation, is whether that was written in there, or if that was the intention of council that was not, kind of brought into the enforcement measures that we're currently seeing on this property or any property that has a shoreline lease development.
Councilor Rob.
With all due respect, on a couple of fronts. One, in regards to the statement you made, Mr. Mayor, in regards to the motions, I highly respect that. Motion should be checked at the door. All situations should be looked at specifically. And in lieu of other comments that I've heard around the table, well, if I can do this, no, you can't, because we have policies in place. What we're looking at is a separate circumstance here. We're looking at a fence that went up 20 years ago. So please, with all due respect to the elder and the emotions flying around the table here, it's site-specific and in a matter of time. So, again, I will hold that argument in lieu of attempting to live up to our policies, but having some respect for the people of our community.
And I don't disagree with what you're saying, but then we have to change the policy, because right now, if I was Robbie in his shoes, I would be so confused and wouldn't know what to do with my job.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's where we need to change that. And if that's sort of what Councilor McPhail alluded to, if that's the case, then I think we need to be specific, because To me, that's very frustrating for him, it really is.
So we're gonna start moving every shed that's off the town property, we better.
I mean, that's just it, like, we have to decide what the verbiage is gonna be, and we have to just be specific,
We're gonna
because,
be very busy.
yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to ask a question, which may have relevance on the subject. Is that a residential property or is it a rental? If it's a property,
It's a commercial.
It's a commercial rental
It's
property.
zoned shoreline commercial, but it's owned by a family in the
Right, but right now it's an
community.
empty rental property at this moment in time, if it's the correct
Yes.
property that I'm thinking, right? So if it were a family home, I might be a little more understanding, but to me right now it's very black and white. Again, I'll reiterate that based on the policy. Now, let's look at some options to work with that landowner, right? Or let's change the policy, that's what we're here for, right? Some of the other issues brought up around the table, we're looking at addressing that, like the safety in the community. We've requested foot patrols, needles and garbage and other remnants left on people's properties. We have a Parks and Recreation Department that what they do in the summer months and in the spring and the fall is clean up. So if there's municipal properties that are littered, you know, people need to use that service tractor. Or if we see something going on, we need to let them know that, you know, because we have those resources where we can help physically clean up the town, right? And working with the RCMP, the foot patrols, we can say we know that these are hot spots. You talked about people, you know, using needles down by the waterfront, having sex, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, that happens all along the waterfront, even in those trees by the beach there, right? Even behind the water treatment plant. So we have some serious community issues going on, and I understand why the property owner would create a fence. And like I said, let's try to work with them, but at the same time, let's look at changing our policy, because obviously there's a lot of emotion and a lot of conflict around that, and we need to be fair to everyone. The other piece is, if we're looking at allowing for extensions of property, I don't know if you, but most of you are aware that there's many homes that are back up into a bush or other pieces of land within the community where people have sheds, shacks, fire pits, extra gardens, right? So those are things
Using easements for whatever.
yeah, storage for their trailers and whatnot. So there's a lot going on in the community. So again, I would have to agree with Mayor Ratushniak that Robbie needs clear direction, and Robbie's only doing his job.
Councilor McCullough?
So what I wanted to maybe put forward as a recommendation, and I know that this was the intention of the previous council, and from what I'm hearing from most of the councilors around the table today, is that the intention was clear from the previous council that we were supposed to put enforcement measures once a new development needed to occur at that point, which would in turn mean to me administratively that we do not enforce these measures until a new development is put in place or a transfer of ownership has occurred. That would be part of what we can do. The question that I would have for administration before putting that recommendation forward, is that doable under our current policy, or do we need to bring this back to be able to have an exemption brought back into the shoreline use development to be able to have that intention of council reflective of the policy of the town?
I commit to coming back to council with some more information. I have done some feelers around it, and there is difficulty in providing an exemption around the sale, because Joe and I had chatted about this, about transferring it over and getting rid of the fence and once the ownership changes hands. I have reached out and there might be some challenges there. So what I'm hearing from council is to explore some options to work around the corners of it, if possible. And so I would commit to coming back at the end of April with some further information, whether it is actually adopting a new bylaw or whatnot. I have, like I said, reached out and there might be some challenges there legally on it, but I can't say confidently. So for the sake of time, I'd be happy to bring back more information for the next council meeting, because this isn't being, the letter stated June 30th, so I've been trying to talk to this one individual for the last day and a half and haven't been able to reach her, so.
Are you recommending that we move this to the next regular meeting of council?
Yes.
Okay, then I would put the recommendation forward that we give this, table this to the regular meeting of council. We can't pass any motions here anyway, but that we end debate.
Thank you.
For today, and provided more information comes to regular meeting of council, potentially be able to make a motion on it at that time.
I'll second that.
I think we're gonna leave it at that because we've spent a lot of time and we'll just bring it to the next, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Just because in the essence of time, otherwise it's gonna be a long night here, guys. Okay, thanks, Robbie. We'll hopefully have a little more clarity on that. Okay, we're moving on to salary continuance policy, issue report. So, as this comes up, maybe my element is.
No, mine took a long time to load as well. After
Yeah.
about 5 or 6 tries, it loaded.
Does anybody have this up? Is that you? Is that yours?
Yeah.
Okay,
You can
go
jump
ahead.
in if you want. What this is actually a policy we brought back in to provide a short-term disability benefit for staff once their sick time and vacation time is run out. So if they actually fall off a roof or get, as I've talked to one staff already, if they've had carpal tunnel syndrome for 8 weeks and they don't have enough sick time or vacation time to carry them through to a long-term disability claim, this would provide a short-term benefit to cover off that amount. I've been asked already by staff if it's a continuation of the sick time. It is not. It is not a simple yes or no. There's actually an outside policy, outside body that will review this and make sure they're actually sick. There is a financial benefit to the town, and that Revenue Canada will reduce EI premiums by 20% for the town. So it does actually pay for itself in some respects, and that's actually every year. That doesn't just happen when the person claims it. So. And then if they're off long enough, they would be transferred over to long-term disability policy and the insurance would pick up there. So that's actually quite a common practice
So do we just pay a premium and the plan would cover up 66% of the wage, or do we have to pay directly out of town?
So it would be paid out directly out of the town. So again, if the other piece goes through tonight, we're moving our long-term disability up to 4 months, right? So you can access the 4 months, and most people have about 2 to 3 weeks of sick time anyway. So we're talking about paying out a salary of anywhere from about 1 to 3 months, and it's already budgeted for, right? So it's not like we haven't actually budgeted for it, because if somebody gets sick halfway through the year, that amount's already in the budget. But what I'm saying is, if we get the salary continues going and get the EI reduction, then we would actually draw that money from a dedicated group benefits reserve. So the savings generated from CRA savings would put into reserve, and that ultimately would fund anybody accessing this policy.
Councilor McKell?
So, a question I have, I guess, surrounding the funding of a salary continuance policy or some sort of short-term disability coverage that we might have. If we're bringing this forward, then I do know from a taxation purpose, if a employee is the person that pays their premium, then the benefit of that is non-taxable. But if you have the employer pay that, so would we put this forward to potentially bring this back to the staff to allow them to opt in or out? And I know with group benefits, you can't have an opt-in, opt-out for certain parts of coverage. It's either all in or all out. The question that I would have surrounding that is, because you can only be covered to 69.99% of your salary under the legislation, it would be in my interest to bring that back to the staff to let them know whether they want the full 69.9 and they pay the premium, or they get the full 69.9 and they pay taxes on that benefit when and if accessed.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, I've talked to a few staff, I've talked to everybody, and of course their preference is for the town to pay for it. Just another comment, if the employee pays for that benefit, there's no CRA reduction. So it has to be an employer-sponsored program, and to my knowledge, that reduction on the EI benefit wouldn't be there if the employee pays 100%. I haven't talked to every employee, so I've only talked to one or two. Of course, their preference is similar to the LTE.
So employer-sponsored means, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if it's an employer-sponsored, that means that they are saying that through our organization, if you would like short-term disability, it is this vendor that you have to choose because that's the town's vendor for that benefit. Is that what you mean by employer-sponsored, or do you mean employer-sponsored by we pay the full premium?
You go ahead and apply the full premium.
Okay.
So I see that staff sick time is capped at 30 days.
Can I actually interrupt you? Are you in conflict of interest on this matter?
Oh, I guess, maybe, okay.
That's up to you.
No, I was just, actually, my question is not related to a conflict of interest piece, it's just a question.
Yeah, but it's,
Oh,
are
okay.
you in conflict because
Oh,
of
okay.
your relationship though?
I guess I should know this.
That's up to you though. It's, you.
No, my question is, what was
Okay.
the cap at before the 30 days?
From my knowledge, Council, there was no cap.
Oh, okay. That was my question.
Any other questions?
So basically, a permanent employee would be somebody that's already passed the probation and then they become a full-time
That's
employee.
correct. And if everything works out, we will build up a sizable reserve, because as soon as we put a policy like this in place, the CRA reduction gets in right away, and that would be into a dedicated reserve that would be used to fund any kind of changes in there, so.
Well, I think it's good. Good policy.
So are we looking at the town taking on a short-term disability plan through a new benefits provider?
So this is the town providing the benefit through payroll, right? An outside agency saying Abby gets the benefit or she doesn't get the benefit. So we're not making the decision here, so it's not political, it's not administration. Somebody wants to get the benefit, they have to go and apply to Gross Life or Sun Life. They adjudicate, they come back and say, yeah, they're qualified for 2 weeks worth of benefit.
So we are self-insuring the cost of the salary, but using an outside agency as the adjudicator of each individual policy.
Correct. I've done this before, so actually, the outside adjudicator not only is basically reviewing the file, they become an advocate for the staff too. I've seen it where a outside adjudicator opens up new doors to get them back to work, because their job is to get that person back to work as quickly as possible. So they, for example, one in the previous municipality contacted a specialist out of Winnipeg because they couldn't get in to see one locally to get the information.
Sorry, if I'm speaking out of turn, I'm sorry, I didn't see if there's any other hands up. The question I have on this is, for as far as, taking on a bit of a cost. If somebody gets injured while on site at work doing work duties, the short-term disability is basically null and void because of a workers' compensation
Right.
award.
Yep.
So what this plan is doing is basically ensuring if somebody gets injured in the 16 hours that they're not working for the town.
Non-occupational.
So it's the non-occupational coverage, so it's okay.
It's, I mean,
Right.
it's, to put it in context, the range of the insurance would be anywhere from 1 to 3 months, because as soon as the policies were, as soon as they qualify for LTD, they're over there, right? So,
Right.
and they've got 30 days of sick time, they have to use up all their vacation, so if they've got 4 weeks of vacation, they again would have to use up all their vacation until they access the benefit.
And the problem I have with this is taking on the assumption also that we have 30 days in everyone's bank, that no one's used it either, right? So, I mean, if somebody accrues a day and takes a day and doesn't have anything in the bank, then we're basically covered in from a zero elimination period right up to the 3 months, 4 months.
You're absolutely right, Counselor. There's a risk that somebody has 3 days in the sick bank, and they have to be on it for another 3 months. That is a risk for sure.
So 120 days on, let's say, a weighted average of total cost to the employer of 250 can get rather extensive.
Oh,
And
for
if
sure.
we are self-insuring, and that this isn't going back to any kind of assurance or a group benefit plan.
No, so just if I can, put in context, size comparable community, 5 years there, the short-term disability program was accessed for 6 weeks for carpal tunnel syndrome, right? For a staff of about 40 people, which is a little bit bigger than here. Again, short-term disability has a finite length, and the odds of having 10 staff off at one given time, well, one, that's going to cause operational issues because now you just lost 30 of your staff to provide services. And two, again, if you build up that reserve with the savings, when it does come time to pay out, in the short term, when we have a small run, but the long term, the way self-insuring works out, I've done it. Like, I've been in a municipality where we built up $750,000 in reserves by self-insuring. That should actually work itself out in the long term. And we're not taken on long-term disability risk here is still with the insurer.
Can we have a policy that you have to have a minimum service years?
Yeah,
Maybe as a benefit, say you have to be with the town for 5 years
Yep.
before you qualify for,
Yeah, no, we
For
can
this
put that in there
benefit?
too, for sure.
you know, so you're not dealing with somebody just coming off the street, just gets probation, and next thing you know, they're,
Yeah.
you know.
So, a question I have is, and I guess this is more so a question to council and, for CAO, would like to, if I've made any kind of error, please correct me as I move forward here. When I look at the financial implications, in our issue report, we talk about the salary continuance program. Revenue Canada will provide the town a reduction on the EI premium that the town pays for staff. It's estimated at $5,000 per year. We're self-insuring. If one employee takes that program in the first year, or if we have one a year, we would be, in my understanding, it would cost us far more than where we're currently at. And unless I see the savings at more than $5,000 per year, I would prefer that we do take this back to our staff to see if they are willing to participate in that, so that we can, you know, build up these reserves to maybe be able to have this wholly self-insured by the organization after a period of time. And then at that point, obviously the staff would no longer have to contribute. But for me, the risk versus reward on this one at approximately $5,000 savings per year is not worth it in my mind currently.
Any feelings on that?
No, I mean, it's all based on analysis, and I can't say that you're completely wrong. There's certainly a risk here, right? I guess the other thing to do is to do a policy review after a year or two and see what the usage is, right? You know, and if it's a high usage, go back and say the town wants the staff to get into it, or review it and see what the cost position is. The thing about insurance is when you actually go back and look at it, the average premium for insurance, 33 to 40% of every dollar paid is profit for the insurance company, right? The actual incident rate for insurance incurred is always quite low, right? But the insurance is so popular because they're taking on that risk, right? And I think what you're saying is that you're having trouble wrapping your head around the savings versus the risk right now.
Because in a large-scale organization, obviously your amount of people would accessing that would be proportionate to the same thing, but your profit margins are higher because you've spread it out over a large group. And that's where I'm having the issue is it's taking on the risk. If it's a senior level executive, that like this could be 5 years of savings in one stint.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess that from your knowledge in the insurance world as well, the question that I would have is, do you know if the town implements a short-term disability with a zero elimination period that would last up to the 4 months when long-term disability would kick in, is there still the same savings on the EI premiums that we would have at that point? And so that's where I'm looking at an employee-sponsored short-term disability plan, that we still receive those same savings. We take those into a reserve that we can eventually become self-insured, and then we can cut out that plan at that time if necessary.
Councilor Bouchard?
Yeah, so I don't have the level of bargaining experience that you have, or necessarily that background, but like from an employee standpoint, as an employer standpoint, I'm really in support of this, because for some staff, you know, folks that might work at our rink, to encounter an injury that, you know, outside of workplace, say they're skating there after hours, they break their ankle and can't perform their labor duties. To have that bridging of the gap, you know, they use up their sick days, they use up their vacation, and they have a few weeks to go to get to long-term disability, or, you know, what it may be cancer diagnosis, or something awful and horrible. I think providing that support or that assurance to staff is something as, from an employer's view, I would wholeheartedly want to do if there's a way to do it that is at least neutral. But at the same time, I do agree with you that putting it to the staff in a way that they can decide as a group, I think is fair, because, you know, council can consider this, but if the staff don't want it, I wouldn't want to get into that, right? So.
Councilor Lisby?
What is our current policy on sick time? Is it capped off at a certain level?
30 days.
That's something we could maybe look at, is allowing it to go, so when you do get into bridging, you won't have that gap if they.
Yeah, so with all respect, we're talking the same thing though, because as soon as you start increasing the sick days, you know, like we're talking the same risk.
Increase your risk, right?
Yeah, the only difference between sick time and this is that this program has outside accountability built in, that if somebody's trying to abuse the program, they'll get cut out of the knees. Right, whereas a sick time program doesn't have any, really doesn't have any accountability measure in.
So, and that's where, for me, I do agree that if an employee injures or becomes ill, and they are not able to perform their duties at work, that I do believe that they should have coverage. I'm not that person that believes that if something happens in the 16 hours that you're away, so sorry, so sad it didn't happen at work. I'm not that guy. What I am trying to keep in mind is the balancing act between the financial risk to the town with the reward that we have for our staff as well. I agree that we need a short-term disability plan to take us from 0 days of time of injury or illness to the time of 120 days where your long-term disability would therefore take over. What the question that I would have for fellow councillors and what I'm pushing for the recommendation that would come forward is that we look into a benefit package of a short-term disability with a 0 elimination period for 120 days, and that risk be put on that third party until the $5,000 reserves can be put into a proper allocated fund that we become self-insured. That is the recommendation that I would like to put forward, so that way we keep the same reward for our staff and our organization and mitigate the risk for now to an outside third-party organization.
Councilor Watt, and then we'll wrap up there.
Prior to that recommendation, did we not just sign a benefit package, or are we gonna turn around and have our administration go back to that service provider and say, hey, now can you change this? Or would we look at trying this for a year, evaluate it in a year, see what the cost burdens were, and drawing what Joe has suggested, not for the employee that we just hired, but put a two-year item on that, where that person has to be employed for 2 years, and then the short-term disability package. Am I right in saying, did we not just sign up a?
So that's on the agenda for tonight, and so right now, the town currently doesn't have any short-term disability program at all.
No, but we do have a benefit package.
Yes, but it has no impact on the benefit package that we're currently looking to move. So this would be an addition right now, this is a gap in the benefits. So yeah, I mean, point well taken though, I mean, we could review it as council's wish after a year to see what the implications are for sure too.
So I believe there's sort of two recommendations that we're sort of looking at. One is absolutely going ahead with bringing this to council meeting and for the approval, and maybe looking at sort of a trial period for a year, or sort of what Councilor McPhail is saying. So I think we kind of straw vote this and kind of see, unless,
I just have a question about the model that Councilor McPhail is putting forward. Would that mean that we're paying a premium that would ensure that the third party covers that first period? So we'd probably be facing a higher cost than taking on the risk of just putting in 5,000 that we're getting back from the EI?
So extra premium be for
and that's
covering everybody for that same, this way you're dealing with the cost of one employee for I mean, how many, if you look at the history in the last 10 years, how many employees have we had that have gone on long-term disability and that we had the bridge, we're concerned about that bridge. So even if you had 2 in a year, what's the cost of that compared to covering all staff for those extra premiums?
So in my research on the group benefits to date, I'm not aware of anybody that's accessed the long-term disability program in the town. We had one individual that came close, had diagnosed with cancer, but he had enough sick time banked. He was able to fight it and get back to work. So not one employee's access to LTD. In terms of context for premiums for short-term disability insurance, you're looking at anywhere from $13,000 to $15,000 a year for the insurance. So again, it's all about risk transfers, right? I mean,
I would go with your recommendations for that, concern.
That's okay.
So, previously, I did hold a license in insurance, so that's kind of where I'm understanding the level of insurance as well. The problem that I have, once again, is it's not a matter of how many times someone has accessed or how, often somebody has accessed, but if somebody accessed, what would be the financial implications? And once again, this is balancing risk versus reward. The cost of $13,000 to $15,000 to the municipality, if we offset that, we're at $10,000 net in the red for the year. And if we can recuperate some of that from the staff, if they see this as a need for their families to be able to have that coverage and peace of mind, then we take that back to the staff and say, if this is something that you would like to consider, we need whatever decision we want, because we are not a unionized municipality, so there is no bargaining agreement that we have to follow, or a policy or that we have to follow in bargaining with that. So if we want to develop a 50% plus one vote, that if the staff want it and it be employee sponsored for a matter of 5 years, and after that point, the town accepts all the risk onto that after taking that $5,000 and building up a small reserve that we can then use our reserves to accumulate more and cut out the insurance. Because as you said, their model is designed for a profit. It's a for-profit business. Everyone knows insurance. The benefit that a large insurer, again, I sound like a broken record here, but they have the large scale of taking the town of La Ronge of 30 employees, the town of Nacum at 12, and go through all of these and take them and say we have 300 employees ranging from 21 to 55, what can you insure them for, through a group benefit plan to Surus that basically goes back and provides them a cheaper rate. So they basically just resell their insurance back, and that's where the profit margin comes in from. So if we can self-insure, we would take part of that profit. But what we're having right now is no premiums paid from staff. We are taking all risk with no premium into that. So there is no real profit margin initially. It's all risk initially. And if there is no risk accessed, then it becomes profitable later. That's the issue that I have with what's in front of us today.
So if I can, Councillor, so there's another form of insurance we can purchase without going to STD, completely short-term disability. So, and I've done it in other municipalities, it's called umbrella insurance. So if we have a worst case scenario that $25,000 or $30,000 is paid out a year, we can actually buy insurance that sits over top. I don't know how much it costs, but if we have a major run, then the insurance company picks up the excess. That's how SumoSure works, right? Insurance the excess. So we as a municipality can pursue that, but with a short-term disability plan, the risk is finite. You can't be on there for any longer than, especially 4 months, because that's when the LTD will kick in. So, but we can pursue that as well.
Is this like a liability kind of?
No, it's just basically stop loss, called stop loss insurance, and you can purchase it. So if the town's prepared to pick up $5,000 to $10,000 in risk every year, then you can turn around and say, we want to get stop loss insurance, and anything over $10,000 in this program in the year, insurance company pays. So now you just hedged your risk. So you have still some of the savings, but now you've hedged the major risk that if something happens where you get 6 staff off in the span of 3 months, you've got limited. I don't know what the savings are, but I know like in Prince Albert we had hedge loss, or sorry, stop loss insurance on our dental, and it was about $8,000, but we were insuring a lot more, so it could be quite affordable.
With a stop loss or option, I would like to change my recommendation that I had, that instead of looking at a short-term disability plan, fighting whether or not employer or employee sponsor that we look at a stop loss, and that would allow us to mitigate that risk as well, and maybe a cheaper way of doing so.
I don't know, I think I don't see the same, maybe I'm less risk averse because I don't have that depth of knowledge that you do, but for me, I'm willing to accept the recommendation or, you know, as Hugh's put forward to review it after 1 year or 2 years with a limit on who can access it in those first couple of years. Because I look at it more as a cost of administration, a cost of staff, labor, than I do as something that's a risk reward proposition. It's more a service to our employees.
It's kind of like home insurance. You buy home insurance for years,
You'll be never.
and you think you're wasting your money, but when something happens, it's there.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, if council wishes, push the recommendation forward, I'll bring back some options in the report for term service. I will get an option put together around having stop loss insurance, what it would cost for having a $5,000 cap. And if we'll put in the alternatives of the issue report for the 27th, and the council wants to pull it out and put that one in, by all means. So, I mean, I think I'm hearing everybody kind of in a bit of agreement. We've got a little bit of fine tuning to do. And I have no issues with the fine tuning. We can bring that back on the 27th with the stop loss insurance. I know that's a definite possibility because I've done it before. So
Okay.
I'll dig into it.
You wanna bring the hammer down, I can move. Bring the hammer down.
Thank you. No, it's great debate, guys, but it's, and that's partially my fault for sort of chairing it the way it should go. Okay, so we're good with more stuff coming to us at the next meeting, more information, perfect. Can we move on to council remuneration policy issue report? Steve, are you speaking on this one too?
I can touch on it. Just looking for an update here from council. This is partly requested from council in terms of kind of some comparables around salaries. When Allison and I chatted about this, one of the options that in previous council I was with in Humboldt did, they actually deferred this. They set up a 3-panel committee in the community to review council salaries and stuff like that. Staff got the information for them. That panel came back and made a recommendation to council in terms of what their council, deputy mayor salaries are. So that is another option to consider. And then just some options around the policy in terms of whether or not council wants to put any kind of caps on the budgets for per diems. And I know there's been some chat about whether or not you want to keep with the $160 per day rate or go to a per hour rate. So that's all up for consideration at council's discretion.
I'm not sure where Creighton figured out that the deputy mayor wasn't worth as much as the councillors.
To be honest, I don't feel comfortable necessarily touching the remuneration rates because we've been in here a year. I don't think I can judge my effectiveness to be able to discuss that. But I do have an issue with the per diem structure, and I think going to an hourly rate, because like, I have, some weeks I have 4 or 5 meetings. But they're not all day meetings, they're 1 hour, 3 hour meetings, whatever. I feel weird claiming per diems on, like full day per diems for a couple hour meeting here and there. And with, you know, we do have existing caps on our budget for those outside meetings, so.
I think when we're dealing with 1 hour, 1 2 hour meetings, half hour or half day should be the maximum. But there is all the package you gotta read, and if you factor that in, you get information. And it's aside from council, like if you get, sit on the water board, you've gotta go through the budget, you've gotta go through all the reports. You spend a couple hours reading, you might go and meet for 2 hours. But it still should be half a day as opposed to a full day, I think.
Councilor Watt?
I'm gonna speak, well, because it's a two-part issue, right? The remuneration and the per diems. And my thought is, give it a shot for a year. If you feel you know what, wow, this is entailing a lot of my time, but again, you use the term of a year, we've been into this for like 6 months, and really just getting our feet wet at this stage, and evaluate it after a year. That's my take on it. And again, you're 100% correct on the per diem bit. Some of the meetings are short and quick, so when I'm gonna submit a figure for $160 for a half an hour, I got a conscience, and that isn't gonna happen, so.
I'd be in favor of allowing a third party or committee consisting of members of the public to conduct a review of our remuneration and our per diem policy. That's just. my
Can you
thought.
remind me when the last time remuneration was adjusted?
2017, we froze it.
17,
We froze it.
We
right?
froze it. So it was indexed for inflation, and at that point, the previous council did freeze the council remuneration. I believe it was in June of 2017.
Okay, Councillor Reddery?
It keeps frozen.
Bueller.
just about to cross the street.
Councillor Patrick?
You're gonna have to go to the restaurant. There he is.
Oh,
He's closer.
Hello?
hey.
We can see your eyes moving. Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to get this, sorry for the bad internet, but, the remuneration,
He's in a motion.
the remuneration part, I don't see any issues with, I'm happy with that, but the per diem part, I'd like to see adjusted to, hourly. You know, I know I have to work sometime to go to these meetings, and so that's money lost from our jobs. And so I do believe we deserve to be compensated for our times away from work. But I don't think $160 every time we go to a meeting is appropriate either.
Yeah, I'll add on to that as well. A lot of these boards and committees that we sit on too, there's multiple people that sit on it too, right? So if you are having to miss work or whatever, I think that there can be sort of a rotation basis, or, I mean, I don't know how some of the committees are, maybe they're different than some of the ones that I do on the weekly or bi-weekly basis. But yeah, I think when it comes to per diems, I think we really need to consider how much money is going out on that. And then I think that, I mean, there's been multiple different sort of feelings on the remuneration policy. I mean, the fact that it's been frozen for as many years as it has, and for me personally anyways, in COVID it's been a lot more, but I mean, I also didn't take this job for the money. So, you know, I think having that third party might be, I mean, it sort of judges how they think we're doing too, right? Which is a real reason who put us in these seats. So, I mean, that's my personal take on that.
And I think, like, as a measure of fairness to us, I don't know how the committee would be chosen, so on and so forth. I don't mind the idea of having like an outside group doing the review. I think give us a year so that we have potentially some action items on the table, that some results to show for our work. You know, we had to wait a few months to get our administrator in place and getting on board and, you know, actioning a lot of these items. And I think, yeah, those are my thoughts. But the one part I think we should change is the
I think we've got a pretty good set of people on the Development Appeal Board. You know, maybe that's something we can utilize for, it's outside people.
If I can, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
In Humboldt, they put out a call and council picked the people. So at the end of the day, we put an advertisement out. They actually got, I know who they are because I still keep touch with one or two of them. And the accountant was one of them, owner of a accounting firm locally, was a former teacher, and then the other one was just a former store manager at the retail level. And I can tell you, that I still remember it, the council salaries didn't change at all. Based on the recommendation, it was actually the mayor's salary that they changed, just due to the amount of work. And again, I can't speak to the individual details, but they actually changed the mayor's salary at the time. This is multiple years, but we put out a call, and people put their name forward. And then council made the determination, just based on the skill set they were looking for, to have the parties represented. So it's a transparent way of doing it, and then it's not council deciding their salaries, so.
So to give some of the new members on council a bit of history on just council remuneration in general. When first elected, there was at the time a 1/3 of your council salary for elected officials was considered non-taxable, and that was the government's recognition of public service in the sector. So that has since been removed, which means 33% more of your income as a councillor is therefore taxable, which does change the total value that you see in this position. That being said, I recognize the privilege that I've got a good paying job with, some level of flexibility, that if I give enough notice, that I might be able to take a day off on my own time to be able to be at meetings and not have to have the per diem or additional remuneration, that the policy would truly affect me either which way. That being said, I do agree with some of the sentiment at the table that a per diem for the entirety of the day, I think at the time the intention was to cover things like SUMA, and when you're leaving town for the day, that those kinds of per diems would be accessed at that point. But I think the general intention of the bylaw at the time of it being drafted was that most outside board committees, unless they're all days, that those per diems wouldn't be accessed. That doesn't mean that you can't access it based on what the policy is there. But I do believe that the intention, that what we can do is put in recommendations to look, I wouldn't go as far as to breaking it down hourly, because as Joe had said, or Councillor Hidisky, has said that there is a lot of preparation work that goes into some meetings. Some other meetings are just update meetings. But for a councillor to then say, I was also reviewing a outside board and committee for 3 hours, and let's say it's the Woodlands and Waterways. Both Councillor Vetri and I attend that meeting. If I put in a claim and say I was studying and researching for 5 hours and I want to put that in, or if Councillor Vetri said 1 hour and put that in, I wouldn't want to get into those situations where I would just believe that if there's a meeting held on that day, you get a half day per diem. That is acknowledging your prep time for that meeting, whether it take an hour or 3. And if you have 2 meetings in a day, morning and afternoon, that you should have the right to still claim the full day because you've had to take a full day from your place of income. So on a go-forward basis, I would like to see the recommendation put in that the per diems are based on a half day. And I would just say that you take the 160 current per diem that we have. I think that is fair for a councillor to be missing a day of work. And that we would put that in at the $80 per half day, or for a half day per diem. I would put that forward.
I think it's okay, so where does that sort of leave us here? Because there's a lot of different ideas, and I don't really know where to take this now.
I'll second, if you're making a recommendation, I'll second that now. And I'll just, I think Councillor Watt said that we would, as far as any review per diem, we would, or like enumeration, and we would wait at least a year before we did any further. If you want to add that to your motion.
Yeah, I have no problem with the total remuneration package going into a model, kind of what Councillor Rizar had said in bringing in community. So I think part of that process is also having communities understand what is involved in what we do. It's another way of an added level of transparency to say that this committee comes back with these recommendations. It takes a bit of the awkwardness away about discussing your own salary with taxpayer-funded dollars, that you have some community consultation and some community input into those deliberations as well. And maybe if there was a recommendation from administration on best practices on bringing that community consultation involved. I don't think if you ever open the door, put a poll out there based on, what raise or decrease should council get. Because I think if you just put in a public poll, you'll have everybody just, putting in their 2 cents. And if there's a best practice that we can have, I think that's what I'd like to see. But for immediate change, if there was anything, I'm fine with leaving it as it is for the current calendar year and doing a full holistic review in a year with that community consultation in place. But if other councillors are also in the mood to bring that to the half day per diem immediately and then look at the full remuneration in a year, I'm also fine with that.
If I can suggest, Mr. Mayor, if we're going down the path, and that's what Allison and I chatted about, bring in outside committee, again, give them lots of time, any recommendations effective for next year's budget cycle. So then give the entire year 2021 to do the review, come back, report to council selects, there's lots of time. Then we're not rushing this, I mean, any recommendations that are adopted by council will be for 2022.
I will make the recommendation that on the regular meeting of council that we put forward a motion that council tables all discussions involving council remuneration policies to budget year 2022.
I'll second that.
And then are we recommending about the per diem separately?
I'm gonna say that we'll go with I'm putting that recommendation forward. Any other councillor has the option to make another recommendation to change it initially, but I've put the recommendation forward that all matters in council remuneration policies be directed to 2022.
Does anybody want to see any changes to the per diem sooner than that?
Well, I think that for myself, I think that our policy is unclear. That's the question I have for you and for Stephen. And I think we need to revamp this policy to make it very clear as to what is what, because right now it's a little confusing, and there's reference to policy from 2011 and reference to policy from 2014, and I would just like for it to be very black and white.
Yeah, like what we can, and not
Yeah,
have a gray area of
very-
what should be claimed and what shouldn't. That way
Yeah.
there is a better understanding. That way nobody sort of feels.
Reduce it to half a day?
My original recommendation was, but with the idea, rather than going to the public and have the perception that we're changing our salary every year, I prefer that we just leave everything as it is until budget year 2022 and have a full comprehensive review at that point.
In addition to Jordan's motion, I would like to request that administration take out some of the extra pieces in this policy that make it unclear, as there's reference to items from 2008. Immediately? Well, as soon as possible, just to clarify what is remuneration. Like, it's not gonna be a major motion, it'll just be,
Is
That we would have to adopt.
that more so just, sorry,
Yeah.
I mean, is that the application of the policy? Like, so that way there's some clear lines as to, like, to
Basically.
interpret the policy for councillors to be able to look at that and say, can I or can I not?
for anyone, right? Because
Right.
right now we're talking about in 2008, in 2011,
Right.
right? Like, we need to just actualize it, make it clearer.
And a lot of things have changed, especially with COVID in place as well, with meetings that are, we're not traveling to, or we're not doing this, we're not doing that. So there is a lot of unclear language in that I think we could clear up sooner, so that it's, we're not doing a full day per diem for a 30-minute meeting. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if we can, I personally, and I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I would love to see that changed immediately and brought to the table, and then I'm with your
That's what I
recommendation.
thought was in the motion, that when you first mentioned about the half a day, I thought that was part of the motion.
Yeah.
That's why I
We
seconded
want to make
it.
a motion to pass the chair over to the deputy with the motion.
Well, we're not, I don't think I'm motion, right, because it's recommendation.
It's a recommendation.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, next
sorry,
week.
I don't know, of course either, so,
Yeah, no, you're.
can I do that?
If you're putting a recommendation forward, there is no motions, the chair can't make a motion, but the chair can make a recommendation.
Okay.
My fault.
Okay, so, I mean, that would be my recommendation, is to at least bring some sort of policy, update for remuneration as far as per diems go, not for salary. Just so it's a little bit clearer, so we know, and then there's, I don't know, for me, it becomes a little bit like, can I, shouldn't I, should I?
Exactly.
And it'll be, that way no one feels bad about having to do it and doing it, so that's where I stand. Councilor Watt?
Real quick, there's been a lot of conversation, so is it clear that the recommendation will state that the per diem will drop to 50% as the existing is written right now to $80 per day?
So how
No.
many?
For half day, so just taking the 160, and if you have 2 meetings, you can claim 2 half-day per diems at 80 and 80.
Unless your meeting is more than 4 hours.
If you have 1 meeting that lasts 6 hours, but that's where it'll be, that's the interpretation that's gonna have the hard part. And that's why for me,
We haven't seen one yet, but I mean, if you did have a meeting that lasted more than 4 hours, then you claim a full day.
So if I can, Mr. Council, so we'll come up with some language, but I think what Councilor Diskey's getting to is that at the end of the day, it's kind of like a minimum threshold. So if you do 2-hour meetings in a day, you still claim the $80, but as soon as your total daily hour count exceeds 4 hours, then it triggers the full $160 for the day. So it's kind of what I think Councilor, or predicts he's going to. So if it's 3 3-hour meetings, you still only qualify for the half-day rate in one day. So it's a cumulative total, but it's a minimum of X amount of dollars up to 4 hours. Anything over that in the day for 4 hours of the meeting then triggers a higher rate. If that makes sense.
Okay, okay, great, let's move on. Moving on to group benefits, plan policy amendment issues. Mr. Brown.
This is all part of the overall transition, I guess, and it should be on here tonight too. Maybe it's later on, but anyways, this is all part of the plan transition at the end of the month here for council to transition away from SUMA's group benefits over to EMA's group benefits at a reduced cost and higher benefit, and this is just updating the policy. There's no structural changes other than the previous policy reference SUMA and stuff like that in it. And if council does, again, approve the transition here tonight and April 27th to EMAs, this is just strictly structural, it's just housekeeping to clean up the wording, that's all it is.
Anybody have any concerns? Councillor Watt?
I will take administration's recommendation.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, excellent, let's move on to the
Good
next
work
one.
on that one.
OCP and zoning bylaw.
Okay, if I can, Mr. Mayor, jump in here. So we've been talking caretakers for the last, well, probably prior to me being here, and so discussion with Robbie and Dee at Pine Branch back in 2017 when the original zoning bylaw was updated to allow caretaker suites in the industrial park. The OCP was not subsequently amended. So all the caretaker suites in the this area has been kind of legally non-conforming for the last couple of years. And I guess in lieu of the whole discussion we had over the weekend around developing the whole economic corridor and kind of developing a plan with there, I'm suggesting to repeal the amending bylaw back in the zoning bylaw in 2017. The existing structures that are there are still going to be there. We're not taking those away, none of those will be legally non-conforming. And then look at the overall parcel and develop a comprehensive plan. So.
Go ahead, I know you're ready to go.
So I totally agree with this. I think that we need to just repeal. Looking at the policy, so the OCP is the overarching policy that's governed by the planning and development legislation. And in our adopted policy, all it says is dwelling units will be considered discretionary uses in the zoning bylaw, will only be permitted on sites where a dwelling unit was located within the previous 18 months. So that allows for anything that existed before this bylaw, fine. But new dwelling units or caretaker suites or anything like that is not considered in the industrial area. And this is it's industrial development policies, so M1 or M2 district. So that makes sense. And
I guess the other thing, you know, like, need to be more clear on what's acceptable in terms of square footage, you know, because is it the footprint, you know, really when you look at the floor plan layout, it was like a 2,000 square foot. But I have no problem with that. I really don't. It doesn't really matter to me. I'd rather have that than have 2 levels and have 2 suites in there. You know, and have, you know.
If I can, Mr. Mayor. Further to our chat about developing that whole area, and I'm not saying we can bring it back or anything like that, but that's what I'm suggesting. I think Councillor Abbott and I have chatted about is look at the entirety and look at bring somebody in and kind of develop an overall plan for the area, start developing design engineering home in there. So we'll discuss this further tomorrow night. So I'm not saying we can't bring it back in. I'm just saying let's look at the entirety and let's develop a comprehensive plan and see where everything shapes out, and then let's move forward, right? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying take it out permanently, just back it out so we're clean, and then let's take a holistic look at the entire area and develop a solid plan.
effectively, all that repealing this does is, yes, there were some developments that were approved in the meantime, but they will just become legal non-conforming, which the implication is, if a dwelling, any development that is legal non-conforming, I'm kind of generalizing here, but the essence of legal non-conforming means that it is allowed to continue as long as it is But the one exception is if it is more than 75% destroyed, so fire or flood or something where 75% of the structure is damaged and has to be replaced, it cannot be permitted. So if somebody, we repeal this, you know, and aren't gonna plan on allowing it again, if a home out there burns down, the bylaw doesn't allow for them to rebuild it. That is one implication, just to, so you know.
And so your recommendation is to repeal that, so that if somebody has a legal non-conforming building, that if it burns down, they can rebuild that same building?
If I understand what Councillor Abbey's saying right now, that would not be the case.
Yeah.
Sort of, and the question I have is, are we repealing that part? Are we saying that if somebody has a non-conforming under our current legislation,
We would be allowed to let them rebuild with the discretionary use.
So,
Technically, or according to a zoning bylaw,
so
but
how are you
our,
gonna compensate somebody that's lost a 400,000 building?
it's not our problem.
And it burns,
No, I'm,
and you
that's.
can't replace it, so that person's gonna be out $400,000 because they can't do it?
Well,
I
insurance
think you'd
can.
like to
No,
look at one.
Not that I'm an insurance guru, but insurance clearly states that you are to build on that said piece of property. That I'm sure there's a clause in there, so we're, on the lines of what Joe is explaining here, if anyone loses a property of $400,000 and they have it insured for 400, they are stating that you have to rebuild. They're not gonna cut you a check for $400,000 and say, see you later. I think you have to conform to that piece of real estate. I could be wrong.
Some policies do have that, that's correct.
That's where you'd be running into some huge legal challenges.
Well, I don't know, because
Because you
There-
know, if you're grandfathered in because it's an act or whatever,
grandfather doesn't have to, but.
you know, you can't just say, well, too bad, so sad, you know, like it's a reality that you're gonna have to deal with it, or else it's gonna be settled in court.
Which may be the case, but to be honest, if the municipality sets a policy, then, but,
Policy is set after the
and
fact.
these buildings were permitted under, they weren't permitted even though they were, I
They were-
don't know how to say that, but
They were allowed in there at the time.
Sorry, one second, let Councillor Bashar finish.
I'm just saying that I'm pretty sure the municipality, if it was done correctly, wouldn't have to take on a lot of that liability, because there's already liability to the municipality by them existing there. So there's competing issues happening with that, and like I understand the personal investment in some of those properties and the fact that that is home to some, but trying to find a way forward that maintains a bit of the sanctity of the fact that it's
You can try and choose your
industrial.
words all you want, but you're not gonna convince me that somebody can lose $400,000 piece of property and just walk away from it.
Can I make a suggestion, and then we'll look at the repealing, and we'll come up and see if we come up with option to allow a rebuilding in the case of a fire. I'll talk to planning branch, we'll come up with a solution to address the concern. If we can't, we won't bring it back.
Did you?
no, I was a part of this.
Okay, so that's the recommendations that you're gonna get some more information and bring that back to us. Okay, can we move on to employee, recommended policy? And again, Mr. Brownell, when you have a sec.
Yeah, this is just bringing in a policy to recognize long service employees. I want to stress this is not a monetary policy, so in previous lives with other municipalities, the policy gives out a catalog. So an employee that has 20 years might be able to pick out a nice jacket for $175 to the town logo on it. So this is not giving money, this is just recognizing staff who've been with the town for a number of years, and also having a nice lunch. In North Battleford, we had all council come out and shake everybody's hands that worked for the town for 10 years. So this is not a monetary issue, it's just recognizing long service staff. And then right in behind there, I had the fire chief write a report recognizing a long service captain that just retired here recently, been with the fire department for 20 years, and that's one of the examples I had put in there that this policy where we'd have a nice little luncheon, and again, invite council, council would get up and shake hands, take a nice picture recognizing the staff. It's an employee recognition piece and just helps recognize the commitment the staff have to the organization, so.
I was gonna say that I believe that when we had just recently, and Huey, I think you were there for those meetings as well, when we redid our personnel policy, I believe we had it in it, a gift or retirement that was not to exceed $250 under our current personnel policy. And I think the only thing that we took away at that time, Hugh, was a Christmas bonus.
Yeah, we got back on the Christmas bonus, but there should be some rate.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, so I talked to staff, all those policies were removed. So there's currently no recognition policy at all, otherwise I wouldn't be bringing this forward.
Okay. I think this, yeah, I have no problem with this coming forward, because it's at the intention of our last personnel policy. It was, I distinctly remember one or the other, and we had said that we had no problem to give policy at the 250. Up to that maximum. So if it's not there, then I have no problem. Bring it forward, and that's the recommendation I put forward.
Anybody have any issues with this, or is this, everyone okay with the recommendation? Okay, excellent. Let's move on. Let's move on to the Fred,
Should that be in camera or no?
No, we don't, I don't know, Mr. Mayor, we need to discuss in great detail, that was just to bring it to council's attention that just recently one of our captains retired after 20 years with the fire department, just to make council aware of it, that's it.
Okay, so,
Just receive and file.
okay.
So the administrative recommendation of the bond, we don't need that because of what we just.
It would be included in part of that policy not going forward.
Great.
Well, since it is the issue report, I would like to say thank you to the member of the fire crew that has certainly been a huge part of building everything that we have there, and going from a small little fire hall just across the street here to what we currently have sitting on the highway, and thank him and his family for the sacrifices that they put towards the municipality and keeping our residents and our region safe. So, thank you.
And contributions to the community in general.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Another thing that should be mentioned is that he was very active with the Firemen's Association, and the Firemen's Association actually bought a lot of equipment over the years and donated it to the fire department. I'm not sure, what's going on today, but certainly over the years, he was a big part of that initiative.
And I want to speak on behalf of serving on that fire board, in recognition of this particular individual, Mr. Jorgensen, in standing up during the turmoil of our fire chief situation. He didn't even hesitate. He just took command, just as he's always done. So this is a very upstanding citizen within our volunteer fire department. So again, he should be acknowledged for his services.
I don't know how many times he won the firefighter of the year. I can look up at the trophy, I guess. But he's won it several times. So.
Thank you for your kind words, everybody, and yes, I echo that as well for all the service that you provided to our community, so thank you. Okay, we'll move on to prescribed burn issue report. Fire Chief Keaton, I believe that you're just muted, perfect.
Yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to go back on the last issue report there. Thank you, councillors, for recognizing Captain Fred Jorgensen for all his years of service on the department. And, he'll be greatly missed, but he won't be gone forever. He will still be helping with training moving forward, so we'll still see him around the hall. Yeah, thanks for those words for him. So moving on to the issue report for the prescribed burns. So essentially, for 2021, the fire department will be taking proactive measures to help mitigate wildland-urban interface fires. This will hopefully be an annual occurrence moving forward, and will involve multiple organizations for training. So essentially, you guys can all see that map there. That is the area that we are requesting to burn for this coming up May. I don't know if you guys have any issues or questions with this area.
Just a quick question, the map I have, if I'm sure I've put my bicycle through there about 1,000 times, is this an open field?
It's somewhat of an open field, I guess you could say. It's one of our snow dumps just off of Diefenbaker Crescent and along Bedford. There is a walking path next to it, and on the one side it's mostly dry grass, and then on the other side it is heavily forested.
So just a quick question that I have, and this isn't going to look like a tree thinning project that we just had. This is basically cleaning up the grass and shrubbery kind of around the area to ensure that if a cigarette was dropped while walking through there or something like that, that it wouldn't turn into a bit of a grass fire.
Absolutely, no, this is not tree or brush thinning, it's just strictly grass and surface fields. There may be some shrubs, small shrubs that will be taken care of, but for the most part it will be grass. And this is just one area in the tri-communities. Most of the areas will be mostly on reserve, so we're just looking for, I guess, approval from council on this area at the next meeting.
Okay, just to clarify, Keaton, so the cost to burn that area is going to be $3,000?
Well, it'll be $3,000 in total firefighter hourly wages over, not necessarily just this area. I might have
Okay.
put that down as a mistake, but there will be multiple areas over 2 weekends that we will be taken care of.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
So 3,000 is the cost of your training program, basically a training program to control wildfires?
Yeah, approximately. Like, we'll only obviously be paying our firefighters their wages, and you know, being a paid-on-call department, it's hard to have concrete numbers. It could be 6 firefighters showing up those weekends. It could be 20 firefighters showing up that weekend, right? So it's, I took a guess. It is the best estimate. It may be less, it may be more. We never know.
And Keaton, just so I know, this is absorbed under the regional fire services budgetary requirements, not directly budgeted to the town.
Correct. So the town would be covering 41% of the total cost.
Perfect.
If I can, council, this is part of the efforts that we'll be making over the next number of months to put more information into the report. So again, informed decision making.
Yep.
Again, it's coming out of its existing budget, so it's not a cost, but it's still information that council should be made aware, right? So it's just the efforts that we're going to start making to make sure council is more informed when they're making decisions.
Sounds great. I will put the recommendation forward that the town of La Ronge approve the prescribed burn areas as outlined by our very capable staff of the La Ronge Regional Fire Department.
I will second that recommendation.
Excellent. Okay, we can move on. Thank you very much, Fire Chief Keaton. We appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and councilors. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right, we're moving on to the RATI issue report. Oh, you got this? Okay. Go ahead.
So I think we've chatted with council about this already. So at a bit of a last minute announcement, the Western Economic Diversification has come up with some money for airports to help with COVID impacts. It literally is last minute because the deadline to apply is end of April, and I only got notice of this about a week or 2 ago. So since we last chatted about with council, the representative that's helping out in the program has now informally told Jim, that our airport manager, that we're only going to have about $300,000 out of this program. The bulk of it is going to be going to Regina and Saskatoon.
Point of order. I just looked at the implications here. I am going to declare a conflict of interest as my employer could be potentially impacted by the decision. Once again, I am 23 weeks in sympathy wait.
Yeah.
Next order of motion, smaller tables.
So we met staff, come up with some ideas, and also the airport manager reached out to a number of the airport users out there. So got a great idea from the Rise Air to start putting additional storage out there, I guess for cargo and whatnot, I guess it's kind of pressed.
Sorry, I'm also gonna declare conflict of interest too, if we're gonna bring up my employer too, so, pardon me.
Okay, I'll try to be.
President Chair.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, how do we do that?
But you have to appoint somebody.
Okay, I'll appoint Mr. Councilor Hadiski as the chair.
Okay, thank you.
Anyways, long story short, we're gonna put 2 applications in, one for additional storage capacity off the terminal building to help out with storage and all that, and then also put one in for internet because we've talked to some of the users and they've indicated that actually good internet there actually would help their business out there. Not only that, but grow it a little bit too, potentially, because they're really struggling with good bandwidth. So I already talked to a couple of providers and contractors to put a good internet out there. It's already to the north of this town. It'd be about $100,000 to $150,000. So we're going to put 2 applications in. This is just to let council know we're going to move forward. We're not going to leave money on the table, and we have to spend it in a year. We can't let it sit for 24 to 36 months.
So that would give us Wi-Fi in the terminal as well, so.
Yeah. So 2 projects we're going to put in.
Passenger, whatever they could.
It's for cargo, so again, what Rise Air provided feedback to Jim was they're running out of storage, because with the whole COVID-19 shipping over the internet and stuff like that, they're seeing a huge demand and space constraints for cargo. It's not necessarily passengers, it's Amazon, it's all the internet ordering, they're running out of space. So there's actually great feedback, and I'm quite happy that we consulted with them, otherwise we would have never known that pressure. So that's the 2 applications. One, internet, which from what I understand, the users are unanimously supporting in terms of trying to go after better bandwidth, and also addressing storage capacity on cargo for things like Amazon orders and stuff like that. And we're putting the application in at the end of April there, so this is just to give council a heads up of our intent. We're not leaving money on the table.
Fantastic. It
Any
is.
recommendation on that?
Yeah, I will second the recommendation to receive and file for information. Yeah.
Okay.
Shall we go back in?
So, Colin, we didn't take as long as he's running the show. We went a lot quicker than when you were running.
Thank God. Maybe you should turn around.
Okay, I do want to declare conflict on the incident report because that one, and I guess, can I just share information, Mayor?
Sure.
The reason I didn't declare conflict of interest on the benefits piece, because we as councilors also subscribe to some of those benefits, so really it puts everybody in conflict, but this one I will because this doesn't apply to us in any way. I'll do this, otherwise I'll be much rather.
Are you taking this one or is that Allison? Okay.
This is strictly an FYI for council. We are, again, making efforts here to start tightening up our safety and getting better information, better reports. So this is just an FYI to council that we're adopting a new incident report to give more details for when an incident happens. And I'll be honest, actually, I redid this form in another municipality. We're just honorably adopting it from another professional consultant. Redid this form that we're now adopting. And yeah, so this is just strictly FYI. We're just
I'll
moving
move
forward.
that we adopted. This looks very detailed.
Yeah.
It's, I think it includes all the detail you need to be able to get the, you know, compile the right information.
Exactly, but I'll tell you right now, your proposed projected costs, you may as well double that because I put a lot of pipe in the ground, so.
No, we're actually talking about the incident form.
There you go. Okay.
Sorry.
I just see figures of $210,000.
We're 3.211. No, sorry. Like the agenda item, I think we're disconnected.
Oh.
We're 3.2.11, which is the Town of Orange incident report issue. I think you're speaking of the water main.
Thank you. I was
gonna say, pipes in the ground, incident reports.
Don't worry about it, we already made the recommendation to go forward.
Yes.
I was seriously looking for that amount, and I was just like,
myself. Let's not give these guys $210,000 on an incident.
I'm in there.
okay, so we're good on that recommendation unless there's any further discussion about that. We can bring Councilor Riz back in, please. And now we're moving to water main upgrade.
Super short.
Sigurd, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, hi.
Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yes. Here is the issue report for the existing 2-inch water main replacement. And since we had one incident where our 2-inch water main got frozen and we had to repair that, and we believe that the water main is damaged all, so we have to replace the existing 2-inch water main. And since there was some development activities was going on just beside the hospital and church, so we thought that it would be a good idea to have a water loop around that portion. Like if they're going to develop a big size building, then they need to have enough water to fight for fire. Based on my experience in this event, like if we have a loop, then we could achieve higher quantity of water in case of fire event. So I have recommended that if the development will be approved, then we need to close the water loop to provide enough water for the proposed building. So to do that, if we're going to connect the new development, then it's a good idea to upgrade the water main and put the bigger size of pipe. So in this event, like we are planning to replace with 6 inches water main. So we have proposed to replace the existing 2-inch water main with the 6 inches. And at the same time, I believe that the cost will be shared from the Saskatchewan Health Authority, if we're going to close the loop. But it is just a plan or a proposal that if we have that development, then we should close the water loop to have enough water.
Deputy Mayor. Wow.
I had a quick question. Thank you, Sagar, for that. One of the, I have 2 points of interest. The first one is if the town was going through the process of digging up the current water main and increasing our infrastructure, which I'm very happy to hear that we are. I think that the circumstances could be better surrounding why we have to. But I do appreciate the time and effort that you put in a short order to get this done. The point of interest I have is if we are digging up the water main, is there any thoughts into also digging up the sewer to be able to deal with some of the freeze-up issues that we have on Cuthand Street? And if so, is that going to be reflected in what we're doing? Because what I would hate to do is dig the trench, replace the first thing we see, not go 6 inches further and replace the second thing that we don't see that could also be causing issues in the future. And the second point of interest that I have, maybe it's something for yourself to answer or maybe administration, would be do we plan on doing this in-house or do we plan on putting this out to an RFQ to be able to get this replaced?
I can take and run Mr. Mayor the second question.
Okay.
Well, go ahead, Sarah.
All right. Councillor Jordan, can you repeat your first concern?
Sure. So the first concern I had is, has there been any, do you plan on replacing the sewer as well as the water main in this entire entire quote that you've seen here, or is this just specifically for the water main?
Since we are relying on our as-built drawings, and since we have good drawings, so I guess like it's close to the existing sewer main. So whenever we do any construction activities, then we will be more careful and as you can see, like we have some schedule. Like if we get some green signal for this project, then we have estimated, the project will be done between 2 to 3 months, and we have planned, to replace the water main.
So will the sewer be sufficient? Will the sewer capacity be sufficient to handle the increased water flow and the effluent from the long-term facility? Or is it an appropriate time to also replace the infrastructure for our sewage pipes?
The sewer is 8 inches sewer main, so that will be more than enough to handle the capacity. But it's not decided whether the new building will have the sewer connection on cut hand or the other side. But wherever they connect, it will be enough. Those big, those 8 inches sewer main has tremendous amount of capacity, so it won't be any issue.
You clarify, and then we'll go to.
So, from what I'm hearing, there isn't any current plans in putting a new sewer pipe. And I know that from previous operations issues, going on the off streets from La Ronge has had issues with freeze up. I would say that if we are digging this deep now, that we might put in considerations now to replace that sewer line as well. That might have a lot larger financial implication. But I think that if we are digging that up, that we should do a proper fix of everything. If we're digging once, we might as well dig deeper and get it all done at the same time.
So that's the 2 questions. So first of all, we'll dig into it. There's no pun intended. We'll get into the sewer line and see what it is. And I'll get with CR to see what it kind of profiles. The second question, we will be tendering this out. I've been in a municipality where we tried to do it with city staff, and what turned out to be a 2-week project took 3 months because staff kept getting called away, and then the property owners started getting upset. If we do this, we'll be tendering it out.
Councilor?
Again, Shigar, I appreciate all the time and work and effort you put into this, and I like to see this as in-house engineering, so thank you for that to begin with. Secondly, my long-term experience of dealing with the water mains within our community, this being a shallow burial, I think what you're going to find is you better be looking for a higher budgeted number, that being a shallow burial line in the tune of typically that 6-inch water main, non-insulated, would roll in at about $12 a meter. Your insulated water line is going to be substantially higher. Secondly, time is of the essence here, and I think what you're going to probably entail with government agencies building that long-term facility, hopefully, or with administration, you can expedite that water main, because this long-term facility is just in its infancy stages. And if you're talking about 3 to 4 month install time, there will be no movement from the provincial government on that facility within a 3 to 4 month period, unless somebody knows something more than myself. So again, I think it's pertinent that we get that Catholic Church hooked up, and I guess I'm just speaking on historic experience from myself. So increase that budget number, but also look into the SHA and their schedule.
Just going to go to Councilor Hiskey.
First of all, I like the idea of connecting that line, because then it makes it into a loop, and it gets the capacity where it should be to serve both. But your point is good. I don't think the entire line has to be insulated, because probably down below it can be buried deeper than
bedrock.
Is it bedrock?
It's laid right on Bedrock, right on Main Street.
Okay. Okay, so, yeah, we were gonna have to think about the pipe because certainly, we don't wanna be dealing with it down the road, and the fact that we can get rid of a deadhead line and go to a circulating, that's gonna make
Exactly
a huge difference. But it's still, you still gotta deal with that frost, even though just moving water is still gonna be an issue.
So very quickly, 2 comments. This will be a tender project, so it comes back to council for final approval. This is one we have no choice but to fix. And this is top of the priority list to get done because I'm very cognizant of how we got to this point. I want to look after the church and also want to take Cigar's advice and fix a problem, make it better. So this is top of our priority list.
Cigar, go ahead.
Yes, that 3 month, 2 to 3 month time period was only for the replacement of existing water main. So if we try to close the loop, then it will definitely need a lot of time, to deal with FJ and do the detailed design for the entire section of water main.
Did you have?
Oh, I was just going to make a remark that, with an engineer in house, it's great, and like council is pretty obvious that we would like you to engineer it as best as possible within the conditions that we do have with our bedrock and muskeg and our ability to bury. And just from my perspective, talk about what it is, how it is, goes way over my head. I think we should keep it high level and talk about the policy that we want to do it right.
And that kind of cycles back to where I landed at the beginning. Although, and maybe this is a technical thing that I don't understand, once again, if we're digging, I want to make sure that we are ensuring that we're not going to have sewer freeze-ups because we've done a proper deep bury of our services, that we no longer see freeze-ups of lines on that, because I think as we have our discussions on future development within our regions, I would hate to see us dig up anything new in areas or have one trench dug and 6 months later go back and dig through the brand new water main to get to the existing sewer services right below it. And I think where the disconnect is here is not the issue of the size of the pipe, but the depth of the pipe. If we can get that insulated, maybe that's where I'm having my disconnect, and maybe Hugh, Councillor Watt, you can enlighten me on that. Is I'm not sure whether or not you can, while we're already there, can you insulate the sewer piping, or in your experience, or from our capable operations team, are we risking a sewer freeze up in those shallow burials of our off streets?
And just again, speaking on past experiences, when it comes to sanitary gravity lines, that being on a hill, you do have sufficient grade to sufficiently pass all that effluent and sanitary goods through that 8-inch sewer line. Where the problem lies in aged material is the design that was used back in 1978, that clay could be problematic. What I would suggest, and again, just speaking as a long-term guy dealing with sewer and water, do a thorough investigation on those manholes, because it's all surface and no excavation. There would be a thorough investigation on the lifespan expectancy. But also, you gotta bear in mind, they're tying the water line in at the hospital. Now you entail dealing with the sanitary, gets up to Main Street, so. It's really not, there is no real simple answers to it. Investigations are key, and I appreciate Cigar and Stasha, they're thorough on their investigations, so take a look at that, Sam.
On that Kierden Place.
One other item I want to touch on is the freezing bit. They have had a sewer freezing issue on Cuthand. It's been a continuous problem with the water line freezing. So.
And do you know, Hugh or Councillor Watt, in the town embarked on the Kierden Place program 2 years ago? That cured in place programming for all of our water or our sewer lines? That's what like they.
The lining?
The lining?
Yeah.
So was that on the off streets as well?
In
Like,
situ.
like those were, every town pipe was scoped at that point in the
That's
problem
right.
areas came back.
And that's another thing, they've got some detailed camera work on the sanitary line on all those side streets.
Right. So those didn't come back as heavy priorities last time, so I'm thinking we're okay.
No, I wouldn't say that, because each street had its issues.
Right.
Cockham, Mackenzie, Macaulay, so
But
again,
but those were, the in-situ was put down.
no, there was no in-situ work
Okay.
on those particular pipes, because at that time they didn't require them.
Okay.
So, again, I can't allude to it enough, more investigation needs to be done to mitigate the problems of potential sanitary issues.
Yeah, so I was gonna, Councillor kind of stole my thunder, we're gonna look at previous reports, and if need be, we'd run some cameras down there to get scoping, at least spend some early work on getting kind of an idea. I mean, you can never predict exactly what the state is, because something can be missed, but we'll do our best.
Is it safe to say that council has a policy that we trust our staff to proceed with the best possible improvements or the highest grade improvements possible so that we do not have to go back and fix things later? Because like, getting into the technical stuff is a little, it seems to get into the weeds. So having a policy that directs staff to always be looking at the highest and best option for whatever improvements, therefore the budgets come to us, you know, have the staff having looked at, okay, we're gonna have to replace sewer and water under the street, repaving, blah, 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 here's the budget. And we just know that that's going to be everything that needs to be done. Because I think that's a fair assumption to make with staff, that they do these investigations, and they come to us and they just need the nod and the okay instead of a lengthy debate. I don't know.
Just two pieces. First one, point of information, SHA did announce that that facility would be completed by 2023, just based on a quick Google search. Second piece, I'd like to recommend that the proposal to replace the existing water main be approved, and that the proposal to close the water loop be also approved, and authorize town administration to release the fund for infrastructure improvement and commence conversations with SHA about cost sharing.
The only caveat is that any of this fund approval of dollar amounts and expenditure stuff come back to council, so we don't have the authority.
Okay, no problem.
No, I was gonna say, like, just based on what Abby said, well, every once in a while I do a little bit of a history lesson, and sometimes Councilor Watt does the same thing, and it's just, sometimes, you know, we have to recognize that we have, a lot of the staff haven't been here very long, and there's that history, and our infrastructure is kind of unique. There's problem areas that have been worked on, and it just, sometimes, you know, you're not trying to interfere, but you're trying to just give that information out there to be helpful. And so, it's not that we're trying to tell management what to do, we're just saying, you know what, just think about this when you're doing it, and it's just useful information, and it's not meant to, you know, to try and tell them what to do. So, I just make that point.
Previous 3 years, there's many times I got slammed by being in the weeds. I have no intentions of getting into the weeds. I strongly believe we have staff in place, but there are times with our staff turnover and our particular geological situations that we've encompassed over the last 30 years.
I'm sorry,
apologize.
my only point is it might be better as an email, because then it's more direct.
If I can add, I mean, Councillor Watt and I have come to the understanding in terms of involvement, and certainly Councillor Watt's got some good information, and so we've come to an understanding about it, you know, in terms of talking to Cigar and Stash and stuff like that, and it's worked out so far in the last couple of weeks, so I'm not worried about it.
So is everybody okay with the recommendation that's been put forward? Yes? Okay. Cigar, is there anything else you want to add, or everything's good from your end?
I think I'm good, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
The only thing is, we
Yeah,
gotta
good
get,
night, Mayor and Council, bye.
Bye.
Bye, sir.
we gotta get down to less than 40%. We gotta get more active. I think it's hard to, 150 could be plus or minus 40%, no, but it's so hard to figure out what you're gonna run into.
Yeah, the beginning.
For sure. Okay, we move on to council members roundtable discussion. Is there anything that anyone wants to bring forward at this time?
I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah, that was long.
Smaller desks.
Okay.
Come your chairs?
No.
That's what they're comment on.
If we had, that's the thing, is if we had more uncomfortable chairs, we'd just rip through things. Do we want to sit down?
Kind of true.
I had conversation with the person from province today in regard to the policing enhanced agreement. And in 2012, when the new contract was signed, I wasn't on council at the time, but I always thought that there was dedicated positions to the town, like we paid for 8 or 10 positions or whatever, and I think at one time it used to be that way, but it's not anymore. It's one detachment, and nobody's assigned to anything, and they just run it and where the need is. And then basically the only positions we get that are dedicated to the town are those 3 enhanced policing positions. And the reason I asked about if there's time being tracked for time not being spent in town and, you know, called on emergencies or whatever, was because I was told that that should be tracked. And they should be tracking that, and it's, because I was kind of pushing, well, would they consider compensating because of COVID and everything else, and they haven't been able to do anything, but yeah, unless it was substantial, then they wouldn't go anywhere. So I think we're either going to have to, you know, hold their feet to the fire in this thing, or if we really feel like we're not getting anything, then back out of it. But I don't think there's any way that we're going to get compensated, and that's what I was trying to get an answer on.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because I thought it was to be tracked, and anytime they were called off to haul late, that we were to be compensated. So I'm glad you brought that up, and you know what, I'm sure if a guy dug deep enough into one of these programs, one could find that.
You know, and we may have to pursue somebody in the decision making, like this is somebody that doesn't make decisions, they know policy and whatever, but, you know, we want to go deeper and say, you know what, but I'm going to leave it at this table, and we're going to have to try and probe into it and see what you can do with it, but that's kind of what I've been told, this other thing that.
From my understanding, you know, I think the intention in the contract was exactly what was brought up, that if there was calls for service that took people away from the enhanced policing contract, that they would either be compensated, or that time within that quarterly rolling period would be made up, that an additional member would be added to that complement to make up for the lost time that we did have on those emergency callouts. Because I think the previous council, as I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would believe that from a safety and officer safety standpoint, that we wouldn't have an issue if there was an emergency that one of our officers were called off and moved to a different area. But I do recall that being part of the discussion, and you know, we did, I remember very clearly stating that we wanted increased reporting, which I'm happy to see some of the members come out here tonight and a little bit more thorough from our new leadership at the RCMP. But to answer your question, yeah, I definitely recall that language being there.
So is that in the contract then? Do we know?
I don't know.
Can we have an email sent to us with a copy of the contract once it's found, or?
I believe there was actually a copy sent to Councillor back in.
Oh, was there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
And to answer the question, though, that contract is very vague on the details.
Okay.
But everything is funneled through the Department of Justice, and so, like all the contracts, they basically assume the contracts for the feds, and everything runs through the province, runs through the Department of Justice. So, if we want to pursue it more, I think we have to go direct to a deputy minister or some higher level that can make decisions in terms of addressing that deficiency. That's my point of view right now.
To be honest, you know, every time this comes up, it's a really like recurring issue at this table, and it sounds as though we were promised a bill of goods and then sold a contract that doesn't live up to that. And I'd almost like to sit down at the table to give ourselves the option that maybe at our next meeting, or the one after that where we can, next regular council meeting, that maybe we sit down with that contract and make a decision if we want to give our year's notice. Because then we've got a year to be dissatisfied with it or be impressed by it. And perhaps at the end of that year, we want to renegotiate and actually get those clauses in there. Because if we're just going to continue having this conversation, I know right now we're giving, we are working, actively participating in that contract to try and improve that relationship, and that's important. But at the same time, I don't think we should let it go too long before we give ourselves an opportunity to say, okay, we like this, but we don't like this, and we want to see this in the contract if we're going to continue to pay for these additional officers.
Just a quick point of order on this, and maybe you can give a little bit of guidance on this, administration. If we are discussing any contractual agreements,
I'm sorry, that's.
this could potentially be going into an in-camera discussion.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I
Sorry,
would say
I
comment then.
apologize, thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, which we will say that for. Is there anything else anyone wants to add?
No.
Okay, anyone want to motion in camera?
I move that we go into camera.
Did we want to do, oh yeah, sure, I'll second.
Okay. All right, thanks, Allison.
While we get that camera off, do we want to take a 5-minute recess?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Yeah.